Andrew.
Perfect. Good afternoon. Welcome along to the July meeting of the Community Wellbeing and Regulatory Committee. Welcome to those who are joining us on the live stream. Just noting that Mrs. Paniakut is joining us via Teams, and we have an apology from Councillor Crackett. Would somebody like to move that's received? Barry, Leslie, put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Any declarations of interest for the matters on the agenda? No items of the public forum, so we'll move into the minutes of the Community and Wellbeing and Regulatory Committee from June 10. Somebody like to move that they received? Tom, Leslie, any matters arising? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Tab 5, the minutes of the City Centre Heritage Subcommittee meeting, June 25.
Move those, Mr.
Thanks,
Chair.
Leslie. Seconded, Tom. Any matters arising from that? Put it then. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. We have the minutes of the District Licensing Committee from June, which I'm happy to move. Seconded by Peter. Any matters arising from that? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 7, recommendations from the Bluff Community Board regarding the JG Ward Reserve and 38 Sewer Street disposal for sale and activation. So moved, Grant, seconded, Barry. Everybody's had a chance to read through those, familiar with recommendations. If there are no questions, I'll put that then. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Resource Management Act Reform Update, which is a constant work in process and ever-evolving circus that we had a little more light shone on last week at LGNZ. Jonathan and Lisa Thorne is with us. If you want to take a seat as well, Lisa, and take us through the paper.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks for the introduction.
Might pay to drag that mic in just a little closer, Lisa, sorry.
Does the light go on or something? Is that better?
Yes, it is, thank you.
Better, yeah, gotcha. Kia ora, I'm Lisa Thorne. I'm a policy consultant working with Invercargill City Council on a few things at the moment, one being the housing plan change, but also on providing policy advice around RMA reform. So the paper that you have in front of you was obviously prepared a couple of weeks ago. There have been a few more changes in the reform space since then. So as I move through this, I'll pepper those in where I can to hopefully provide you a more well-rounded current update of the lay of the land. So as everyone's aware, the current government has a package of reform agenda as it relates to the Resource Management Act. There are a number of different phases that, the first phase of which has been completed, and phases 2 and 3 which are both underway concurrently. So what I've set out in the paper here is the two essentially distinct pieces of work that sit under that. So one is the amendment to existing resource management legislation and related policy. And then the other is the full replacement of the Resource Management Act as well. So in terms of current timing, we're currently partway through phases 2 and 3. Phase 2 are changes to the Resource Management Act through a bill that's currently before Parliament. Sitting alongside that, there's a series of changes to national direction that sit under a number of different packages, and I'll go through that in a minute. And then phase 3 is the replacement legislation. So the phase 2 bill to make changes to the Resource Management Act that's currently before Parliament, that was introduced around December last year. It makes a number of different changes to the RMA. I think you've had a paper on that previously, so what I'm going to touch on are just a couple of key changes of interest to the Council. One would be, which some of you may have heard about last week or perhaps this week, is a change called Plan Stop, which looks at essentially taking an amendment paper to the bill to put in place effectively a halt on any plan development where plan changes and plan reviews don't fit into government prioritised categories. In terms of the housing plan change work that's underway, that does sit in one of those prioritisation categories, which is great to see. We're not quite clear at this stage whether that will be an automatic exemption and things can simply continue as usual, or whether the Council may need to go through an exemption process to ensure that's the case. But it certainly looks like, with the communications and the fact sheet that was released last week, that there's a pathway through so that that work can continue as planned. It does mean quite a big halt in terms of workloads for a number of other councils, however. So this will be impacting regional plan development, district plan development, and plan changes kind of across the nation in different capacities. The other key change that the amendment bill seeks to introduce is the ability to use a streamlined planning process to delist heritage buildings in district plans. Now, we're still working through the mechanics of how that aligns with the Plan Stop process that was announced last week. But what is clear is that in terms of a plan change pathway to delist heritage buildings, if the proper reporting is there to demonstrate that the heritage value essentially doesn't stack up under the plan, then there is a simpler process that can be used, but it is still a plan change process. So although it won't have the same requirements around notification, public notification to the general public where anyone can have their say, and it won't have some of the same steps that the planners would need to go through before that, it would still be a plan change process to be notified. It would receive submissions on people who were affected. There would need to be a hearing and decision. So simpler, but still a process to go through. And once the bill or the act is in place, then that will provide that pathway. One of the things to probably note with that as well is that that doesn't change the process that an applicant to delist a building would need to go through under the Heritage New Zealand Pouhere Taonga Act. That process still applies and is unchanged. There is indication that that might change in the future, but reform to do that through the new RMA reform package is still some time away. We expect to see the bill later this year, but that the actual legislation is anticipated to be in place at least looking like the end of next year at the moment. The rest of the paper, I've touched on some of the packages around changes to national policy statements under the current Resource Management Act and new national environmental standards that are going to be introduced. The government's consulting on those packages at the moment. The intention is that they're introduced later this year. So that relates to changes to national policy statements, for example, a new NPS for infrastructure, a new MPS for natural hazards, a new MPS for papakainga, and that's probably an important one for me to touch on with you here, because you might recall with the housing plan change that we're working through, that has an element of enabling papakainga through that process as well. Where we're currently sitting is kōrero's essentially continuing with Te Ao Marama and with Runanga representatives, and we're keeping a really careful watching brief on how the papakainga national environmental standards are shaping up, so we can then look at making a recommendation as to whether we remove those parts from the plan change or whether we keep them, but we look at changing the shape of them so district direction and national direction don't conflict with each other, but work together to achieve the outcome that we need. There are a lot of new national environmental standards and NPSs. So we've got some amendments to the NPS for renewable energy generation, electricity transmission, and electricity transmission activities and communication. Sorry, telecommunication, I should have said. So these are things that in the practical day-to-day will impact the planning team in terms of how they process resource consents and how they consider the new policy. There's also a number of changes in the primary sector space, so amendments to the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land. So that will look to remove the LUC Class 3 soil restrictions that currently exist there. That will have some benefits for the City Council in terms of potential areas that are less restricted than they were previously for different activities that aren't essentially farming and agriculture. There's also amendments to various new instruments to better enable mining and quarrying, and some changes to the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. I think probably one of the more important packages for City Council's information would be around the Going for Housing Growth package. What that looks to do is to explore options for how spatial planning is designed to promote housing and urban outcomes in the future. So where the direction is heading for local authorities, although the new or the proposed reforms are a very different shape than the legislation that was withdrawn a few years ago under the previous government, the key mechanism to unlock growth and enable housing diversity and to plan for the future in terms of infrastructure does essentially look to be fundamentally the same. So that's essentially delivered through spatial planning, and the consultation document out at the moment is what does spatial planning look like under the proposed system. So there are a few specifics that I've noted down here that are relevant to the council. I think probably the key thing that remains is that the proposal is still to have spatial planning at a regional extent, but that with flexibility for local authorities to have specific parts within those broader regional plans that provide that spatial planning lens at your district level. I think I've touched on the RMA replacement, but as I said here, the bills are proposed to be introduced in 2025 and to pass into law mid-2026. So what that might mean is any spatial planning that's done before that time might not necessarily be lost, but could simply be picked up and translated into what that new framework looks like. Councils will obviously need to navigate how they go about that carefully to make sure that there's flexibility to do that. The system will be delivered. I've just sort of set out there what the Proposed Planning Act will do. I've touched on spatial plans already. There will be an environment chapter as well, so essentially that will pick up a lot of what we know as the regional council functions into that approach. And then the planning chapter will more be district land use functions, so subdivision, development of land, that sort of thing. Resource consents are also anticipated to be more streamlined. So essentially more permitted activity standards, less processing time and less consenting overall. And in terms of next steps, that's obviously a lot of change. So the planning team will need to navigate that quite carefully over the next couple of months as more information comes to light about how NPSs and NESs shape up, as what the framework of the potential acts may look like. Then they'll be in a better position to respond to that as it occurs. For things like the NES for granny flats and for the NES for papakainga, typically the Ministry for the Environment will also produce guidance around how councils need to implement it. So presuming that happens with these two, we should have a good understanding of what the expectations are on council and how the planning team will need to adapt to ensure that consents are processed under those new frameworks. I've got a point on the report called lastly. Two key points there. The first is that because the Going for Housing Growth package was really only released a few weeks ago while we were writing the report, we will come back to the committee to provide a more detailed report about what that means in terms of implications for the council in August. Similarly with Plan Stop, what that might mean for how we continue to develop the housing plan change and potentially what the council might need to do in terms of navigating that exemption process. Do you have anything to add? Is that
No, I think
good
you
summary?
covered it. Lots of change, a little light on the detail and mechanics.
Yeah.
I think at this stage we can say we don't see any significant showstoppers for Invercargill City, but potentially some slight interference with some of the low-hanging fruit that we've been aiming to grab at.
Thanks, Lisa. There's been a lot to unpack since Minister Bishop's address following his scolding. As an observation, there was a lot of focus in what will become the Planning Act as opposed to the RMA and how much more permissive it is. And not a lot of light being shone on the Natural Environment Act, because I think there's going to be some inconveniences in amongst that will make it a challenge for people to balance the two off. When the exemptions list came through for Plan Stops, from what I was able to decipher at the time, it was above what we're looking at with the housing and code of practice plan change. But as you say, we still need clarification around that process of checking that we are in the exemption. Ultimately, I don't think there'll be a lot of change apart from perhaps in how some of the zones are defined. And that's encouraging because I think we're making good progress through that. I think the note of caution that I would add is as developers get excited about what's being proposed, it doesn't come into effect until it becomes law. And even though something may have been indicated as that's the way we're tracking, we're not there yet.
That's exactly it. And with policy under the Resource Management Act, especially those policy statements and national environmental standards, that the trick is in that detail. On first read of some of these announcements, they sound very enabling, but the pathway to navigate that and the detail around what is in and what is out is often it's a lot more complex on first read, and there are often fish hooks that we'll need to work through quite carefully. What Jonathan and I did talk about earlier today was continuing to talk to Local Government New Zealand, who's putting together a list to take back to the Ministry for the Environment around questions for how that exemption process works and whether there is wiggle room essentially to expand the list of automatically exempt plan changes. When you look at that automatic exemption list, all of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 authorities, so your high growth councils, the plan changes that they're doing to enable intensification for housing are on that list. There's a gap that we see in terms of Tier 3 authorities that still need to meet those same requirements under the MPS. So if that list is expanded to include and address that gap, then the housing plan change would be automatically exempt. That's the ideal scenario, obviously, because then the council won't need to go through a process of confirming that with government. It will simply continue as it needs to.
Thanks for that. We'll look forward to hopefully a positive update at the August meeting. Tom.
Thank you, Lisa. And it might be that you or Jonathan might wish to answer this. And I don't want you to make any sort of value judgment on the changes that are proposed. But can I ask from a planner's perspective, are the amendments going to simplify the planner's life or make it more complicated?
Can I answer that?
You're a planner.
My view, a bit of both. Navigating this level of change is obviously it's much more complex. I've been a planner for 15 years. I haven't seen this extent of change all at once. That requires planners to shift how they do things very rapidly, but also ensure that those shifts are within the law and meet the new policy framework. And those things take time, even with one new national environmental standard or one new NPS. There's a lot of work that a council needs to do to understand how that now applies and how their planning team needs to work differently. So in the short term, yes, it means more work, would be my view, not less. In the longer term, I think some of the, if we look just at the architecture of what's proposed in the Planning Act, for example, there is some merit in that. A smaller number of zones, a simpler approach to how we plan spatially over what term. I think in the long run, those are things that will simplify what councils do and what planners do, and will make things easier for people applying for resource consent or wanting to know whether it's even worth applying for resource consent or not. Unfortunately, I think that's some years away. We're in a situation where, at least for the next couple of years, there's quite a lot of work to do to navigate the change, and to do that in a way that's smart, so that mahi can be slotted into the future framework and isn't work that is lost. I've got some ideas around how we might be able to do that for Invercargill City. I think one of that's spatial planning, and that's something that we'll address in our next update to the committee.
Rangi.
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions. The first one, we'll start with heritage. Now, in layman's terms, would these changes assist in solving the problem with the burnt-out Spey Street building, corner D and Spey? Obviously, that is at a stalemate. It's going nowhere. Now, would these changes enable something to happen?
So without wanting to get down into the specifics of individual buildings, the indication that there is a desire to review these things and have a simplified process needs to be noted that there are different types of heritage classification. My understanding is that this isn't
Heritage 1.
types. The streamline process is intended to allow councils to revisit their district plan layers in regard to heritage, but that does not cover all heritage buildings. So it's likely to be of limited effect, depending on the number that you have in your heritage layer.
If changes were promoted through a plan change, in simple terms, it means a faster plan change, but still a plan change. And I think that the key thing to be cautious with is that that legislation isn't in place yet, and that doesn't circumvent the New Zealand Heritage Authority requirements.
Okay, right. The next
Could
one.
still be a year away.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. The next one is regards to the National Policy Statement, HPL. Now, it shows in the article that LUC3 is looking to be removed. Okay. Does that still mean, though, LUC 1 and 2 remain very much in force?
That's correct. So the restrictions around enabling what can and can't be done, essentially in that peri-urban periphery, where proposals come in to expand development, whether it's housing, infrastructure, whatever, the policy pathway will be simpler if the land is classed as LUC3. If it's LUC 1 or 2, the policy that exists currently will remain unchanged.
That's fine. And the last one is you talk about intensification. Now, that's very interesting. Now, do you see that the Act wants to encourage intensification rather than sprawl?
Both, yeah.
So he wants to sprawl, so it wants to get thin and trim
So
and eat burgers.
I think probably a simple way of putting it is it's wanting to encourage housing diversity. So to provide for growth in greenfield areas where infrastructure can be enabled. And one of the proposals around spatial planning is that infrastructure timeline is now looked at potentially from 30 to 50 years rather than a standard 30-year timeframe under a Spatial Planning Act. And that's essentially to ensure that those greenfield growth areas can be timed and staged as they need to be if greenfield development's proposed.
Is that some of the methodology behind LUC3 coming off? Or is that for other reasons?
I think that would be one of the reasons, but there are several reasons for LUC3. I think for a council like Invercargill, Timaru district is in a similar position where most of the district is surrounded by essentially class 1 to 3 land. So that makes it very difficult for any expansion, even if it is deemed to be appropriate for every other reason. The change to remove LUC3 is essentially to address that tension.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Mayor Clark.
Yeah, just two questions. One is in relation to the NES on granny flats. So there's quite a bit of public interest in that. And so the description you got there, it doesn't cover all of it, does it? Because from what I understand is that the granny flats can only be built on by the owners of the primary land. That's the first issue, and the other issue is the maximum of 70 metres square is also subject to a certain height restriction as well, isn't it?
Yeah, so what the National Environmental Standards looks at doing is putting in specific enablements and restrictions around granny flats. So it enables, if you have an existing standalone house on your property, it enables you to build one granny flat. But then it restricts that by maximising that to 70 square metres. And then apart from those enabling rules in the NES, the other rules in the district plan will still apply. So an example of enabling rule in the NES is that you could have a site coverage of 50%. At the moment, your district plan says 40%. So the NES would trump your district plan. But it doesn't trump your district plan in terms of heights. The district plan limits for the zone that applies to heights, that would still apply. So it's a bit of a mixed bag of providing for some enabling enabling provisions to permit you to essentially construct granny flat, but also ensuring that there's some rigour around how far that's set back from boundaries, what size and scale it is, how many you can do, that sort of thing. But again, it's not a prohibition. It simply means that someone will need to apply for a resource consent if they wanted to exceed those controls.
So will you be making a submission on that when the bill comes up, when the standard comes up?
We can bring it back to committee and
And why I ask that is that there's a lot of interest about this, and the height factor in particular, which I think is 3 metres or 4 metres, it's not much, and whether we could get an extension of that, which would allow a mezzanine floor to be put in into an existing granny flat, that increases the capacity of it, or suitability of it. The other issues that we've got is that whether these granny flats can be extended out to include seasonal workers, so accommodation for seasonal workers, which might cluster quite a few of them together, or alternatively create construction camps when big industries are doing big developments like down in Aroa and stuff like that, where there's that capacity as well.
It's a different scenario altogether than a single property with a granny flat.
The workers' accommodation scenario is a little more difficult to respond to, but in terms of whether changes can be made, how national environmental standards work is that a council can change their plan to make their plan more enabling, but not less enabling than the NES. So other councils like that I work with, say Mackenzie District Council, for example, they have granny flat rules where granny flats are 80 square metres. So there's a process to put those types of rules in place if a council thinks that they want to enable more granny flats or larger granny flats, for example, but a council couldn't put rules in a plan that restricts granny flats to reduce what the NES is providing for. The fishhook with that is the plan stop process that we've just been talking about. That wouldn't necessarily be a plan change that could be promoted at this point in time, given that direction. What it does mean, though, if you just look at what's proposed in the NES, is that if someone wanted a slightly larger granny flat or a higher granny flat than what's provided for, they would simply need to go through a resource consent process. So typically, it would only be the extent of that particular change sought that would be assessed in terms of effects.
So you'd be looking at the effects of shading on neighbouring properties, and it might be that the granny flat needs to be set back from the boundary a little further to minimise that, but you could go higher.
So my last question is in relation to what Councillor Podger raised, which was the issue of LUC 1, 2 and 3, and 3 is potentially going. Can you just clarify, if you know, I understand that there is potential within the legislation for application to the Minister. The Minister has discretionary rights over LU1 and LU2 as well, so you can get an exemption from it. Well, that's what I'm advised, but
Do you want me to respond? Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll check that. Thank you.
Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Thanks for the paper, Jonathan and Lisa. Couple of questions. Is there the opportunity for us to use our issue in D Street to submit to whoever around how this doesn't work for councils, particularly related to heritage buildings?
there's always opportunity. So, yep, that's
Take that opportunity? Yeah, that'd be good. And secondly, what's the appeals process? Because the AMA has been criticised heavily around things go there and never come out, and the cost of it. Is there any thought been given to how an appeal might be made by a party and how that's going to be resolved that enables the cost to be reduced and the time frame to be significantly enhanced?
So if the scenario is a streamlined plan change around delisting a heritage building, for example, only with the streamlined plan change, only certain parties would even have the opportunity to submit in the first place. So typically those would be people who are directly affected, so adjoining neighbours. It would be parties like Heritage New Zealand, but it wouldn't be open to a full public notification process where anybody could submit. So I guess firstly there's a reduction there in terms of how many people would even be eligible to appeal a decision on a streamlined plan change. I'm not across the detail of whether there are any further restrictions within the appeal process itself. I don't know if that's something that Michael Morris can comment on. I haven't seen it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist either.
Mr. Chair, I haven't seen anything to indicate a reduction in the jurisdiction of the Environment Court or more hurdles to put in place. But as ever, I think the Environment Court is very cognizant of the need to reduce time and the ability to try and get things resolved in a more streamlined manner. And Environment Court, of course, was a pioneer with mediation.
Yeah.
Evelyn.
Oh, kia ora. Through you, Mr. Chair, on page 3 of your report, on page 18 of Board Box, comes as no surprise I'm going to talk about Papakainga. Can I say that it seemed really clear right from the announcement that this is not actually really kind, and it's certainly not kind to us. It talks about residential. What I expect is mixed use, not misuse, and rural zones, up to 10 units on Māori ancestral and treaty settlement land, which would actually mean, if this would apply to us, that the unit I'm about to move into on Saturday would be the last unit that we could build because we are at 10. But we wouldn't have been able to build it at all because we're not on treaty settlement or ancestral land. So I think we need to be really careful. The term Papakainga as it's used here is not helpful to Invercargill City. And it might be that given that we're talking about our housing in our local environment, that we need to actually make sure that this does not limit us to 10, because sometimes 10 means 10, and sometimes treaty settlement land or ancestral land means exactly that. This would not apply to us, it would not apply to Awarua, it would not apply in Southland District in most instances. So if we're really looking at a submission, could you please bear in mind that this is actually not meeting our local reality? I would be quite sad for the people in the North Island if they're limited to 10 on land that they own, or my cousins at Te Ahuriri who have extensive land holdings in Te Ahui who would only then be limited to 10 even if they had 50 acres. We need to actually make sure that this is an enabling policy, if that's what the intention is, not a restricting policy.
Fair to say that we're also liaising very closely with Te Ao Marama around that process as well, but we had to wait to get clarification on what's happening at a national level. It may be that we're able to be more enabling.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that if we're talking about the bill as it is, do we actually sit back because we think it doesn't affect us, or do we actually say the fishhook situation, it's all is not necessarily Greeks bearing gifts, it could be Greeks actually trying to totally disable the whole process. So thank you.
Yeah. As Councillor Ludlow says, that's something that we're working really closely with Te Ao Marama on. In fact, I rushed to the committee meeting because I was having hui with Te Kaimahi on this exact issue, essentially, navigating what the NES for Papakainga provides for, and how does that align with the aspirations of mana whenua? How do the other changes that we're looking to enable more housing density in the plan change, how does that feed into the mix? And then what the gaps are once you look at those things together, and then what is the best pathway to address those gaps, essentially. The situation at the moment is that we don't have the full NES in front of us. We don't know what it will look like, and Runanga and Te Amarama's time is precious as well. So what I'm working with them really closely on is how much effort do we look at putting into developing something for them and for council, if this will address most of the need but not all, and then how is the rest of that need addressed, either through a plan change, a spatial plan, or a future process, so that that's looked at from a local lens. Because you're right, there are councils where this won't be fit for purpose, but there are certainly other councils too that don't currently provide for Papakainga in any way, and for them it's a very good first step. Having this a few years ago would have been great, because then with the housing plan change we could essentially build on it. So we're working really closely together in any decision or recommendation that I take to Jonathan around how we navigate that as a strategy is in partnership with Te Amarama and Runanga.
Governor of Te Amarama, I applaud that decision.
You're welcome. Any further questions or comments? Leslie?
It's not a question, Mr. Chair, it's really a comment that from the report and the answers to the questions so far, we seem to be in something of a curate's egg situation here. Some parts of it are sounding like they might be quite good, and quite a bit of it sounding like it might be quite bad, and we're basically waiting for a lot of further information.
Yep, there's lots of light being shone on the bright, shiny points of the Planning Act and not a lot on the Natural Environment Act at the moment, because it won't be so sexy. And that's where the fishhooks lay.
It's the detail and the curate's egg situation where there's a bit of an attempt for the shiny bits to look as though they're really shiny, but when we actually start the drill down, what we're seeing is that there's potential some good stuff and potential some bad stuff.
I guess the tensions will arise when we get people coming in wanting to do things, saying, but the new Act is saying this. Why are you making it hard? Well, the answer is the new Act isn't in effect yet, and the other Act has stuff in there that you might not have been aware of. But I think one of the things that Lisa touched on is that there's an awful lot for the staff who'll be dealing with this at the coalface to be taking on, understanding and explaining to people as it continually evolves, which it is at the moment on a week-by-week basis. For those of us who've gone through the RMA certification qualification process, it's wait to a degree, but the processes are still what they were, and there will be new processes, and essentially we follow a line. And we'll work through whatever the regulations are. At the moment, they're sitting above us, but our district plan will have to give effect to any changes to national policy statements and national environmental standards. And even though there's a stop on them at the moment, regional policy statement changes as well. So, like I say, once we'd been scolded, there was some interesting information that came out, but we still don't have full clarity. Any further questions? Trish?
I'd just like to say, through you, Chair, Lisa, thank you for that update. It was a really good overview of what we know so far and the questions that we need to think about from there. So it was nice and sort of concise and very readable, so thank you.
Thank you.
Barry?
It mentions here there's a restricted discretionary consent for 11 to 30 units.
For Papakainga. So what the NES proposes is that up to 10 units would be a permitted activity, and that 10 to 30 would be restricted discretionary. So that means that a resource consent would be required, but the pathway is fairly enabling compared to other kinds of resource consents. There's a spectrum of activities that range from permitted, controlled, restricted, discretionary, non-complying, prohibited. The further you get to the prohibited end, the less enabling the policy framework is and the rules are. So any activity that's controlled or restricted discretionary is essentially where a plan or an NES signals that if this is designed to meet the standards, then you can have relative confidence that it will be approved. It's an anticipated activity. But it does mean that there is still mahi to do, there's still work to do in preparing an application and seeing it through that process. But it definitely means that it's not prohibited to do more than 10, it would require resource consent.
Any further questions? Recommendation is that the report is received. Somebody like to move that? Trish, Barry, put that all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. We've kind of also covered off the Housing and Code of Practice plan change through that discussion. So unless there are any further questions around that specifically, or Lisa, is there anything specifically about that paper that you're wanting to add?
No, I think the only addition is that with the plan stop announcement last week, the plan change may progress at a slower rate because we'll need to navigate that process and what that means alongside the National Environmental Standards for Granny Flats proposal with Te Amarama. And that was one of the reasons I went to Te Amarama offices this morning, was to make sure that they, as partners to the plan change, were comfortable with that approach too. They've signalled that they are, because I think both myself and council staff and their kaimahi, no one wants to do double work or spend time inefficiently doing something that's going to pop out the other side in 6 months anyway. So it may mean that the report that we take to notify the housing plan change may come later this year or early next year. We'll work through what those dates look like, and we'll take that to the next regulatory and community committee meeting in August.
Tom.
Yeah. So I suspect I'll kick myself for asking this question, but in the page 2, medium density housing closer to the CBD, in a residential 1A medium density zone east and south of the CBD and so forth, what about north and west? What's the situation?
Sorry, can you point me to where you're looking?
What page, Tom?
Oh, I'm sorry, page 2 of your report. So the table...
Chart, the table.
It talks about east and south of the CBD, and I'm just asking about west and north.
So, through the chair, those are the areas that were zoned in the current version of the district plan for medium density. I can't speak to how that decision was arrived at the time. We haven't necessarily seen the uptake in medium density we would have liked, it's fair to say. But in actual fact, and this often comes as a surprise to people, the CBD is actually quite well zoned for medium density.
And can I add to that? Yeah. The areas at north and east, they are in terms of why some of those areas are zoned residential 1 rather than 1A, is because there are a few restrictions that apply in terms of the land in those areas. So some of the land is subject to natural hazards, and some of the land is subject to the airport noise control overlays, and there are restrictions on subdivision because of that. And my reading between the lines would be why those areas are not zoned residential 1A.
Thank you.
Ringy. Okay. Yeah.
Move the recommendation, Mr Chair.
Councillor Evelyn, put that all in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. The local alcohol policy review. Right. Welcome along. Everybody's had a chance to have a look at the report. This is a process that we need to go through. There are a variety of choices in there, and a procedural question that's raised by the medical officer of health. Looking for us to change our policy. Can I state from the outset at this point that what we're doing is pre-consultation with key stakeholders about what they see as the key issues to review in the alcohol policy. I never thought the process was part of what we were going and asking them, and I'd have found it more helpful if the medical officer of health had restricted themselves to perhaps providing some help around that. My personal opinion is that I don't see a need to drag the process out. If they've stuff that they want to tell us, that's what we're looking for. And even then, what we do is we create a draft policy that goes out for consultation, and this is something that we need to keep in mind with all the things we're about to go through, and receive submissions on that. It may be that we want to provoke some thought in some areas, but it was an interesting and slightly frustrating piece of feedback from the medical officer of health. Hannah and Rhiannon, anything you'd like to highlight before we go through the process?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll take the report as read, but just a few points that may be useful background. As you said, this is a procedural paper, so it's not presenting a final kind of outcome of the engagement. We've been running the early engagement process as it's required under the Act, and we have had a really good response, but not a complete response so far. So we will be continuing under whichever option you choose in terms of timeframes, that early engagement process. We have had some really good and substantive feedback, and Hannah has been coordinating that engagement process, so she's here to answer any questions around the specifics. As you say, we've included the full guidance from the Medical Officer of Health, which really is around the timeframe and the kind of approach and process for consultation. We've also included indication from Southland District Council. They haven't had a formal meeting, but they have discussed this in depth, and so they are expecting at this point to think that they are likely to pursue a separate local alcohol policy. You will recall, of course, that at the moment we have a combined local alcohol policy across the two districts, but we are keen to still continue to work together across the policy teams. Very useful conversations that we've been having with stakeholders so far, and lots of in-depth information that's been provided by the police and others. And then finally, just to note that those points under point 4 are really around some of the issues that have come up through the early engagement process, and it may be useful that you would like us to seek specific further feedback on any of those issues. So we've presented them here for you to really consider. So it's not an exclusionary thing, it's really which are the areas of greatest interest. Of course, we will continue to take submissions on any matter that people want to raise through the engagement process. And as you say, there will be a formal consultation, which is also required once the draft policy is developed. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Just if we proceed as we are now, when is that pre-consultation process scheduled to finish?
Yep. With the draft of the policy coming back to the August meeting. So in a few weeks' time.
I'll open it for general discussion first, and then I'm going to go through them all piece by piece, because I think each one has its own question. I do note around recommendation 3, Southland District Council have indicated they want to go it on their own, which is, without being disrespectful, fine, because there are different pressures that they face as a rural district than we face as a more urban one. and I think giving them the freedom to operate under their own time schedule is probably going to be useful as well. But as Rhiannon said, the chances for staff to talk at a policy level with each other is always has been there. Rangi?
Thanks, Chair. Mine's regarding 4B. Now, I just wonder, does reverse sensitivity apply in the sense that you have an existing liquor outlet or premises that sells alcohol, and then one of the mentioned buildings suddenly moves into the area? Does it then...
Simple, existing rights continue.
Existing rights are okay?
Yep.
That's okay. No, it's always good to ask.
Yep. No, that's an excellent question. Tom?
Chair, I note that, unless I'm misreading any of them, that every single option we're provided is with the intention of restricting alcohol sale in some way or another. And I wonder whether, as well as consulting with medical officers of the health and so forth, we've also consulted with the tourism industry, for example, who I think would probably advocate for the reverse.
The tourism industry specifically, no, but hospitality association more directly, absolutely.
So you said it was general discussion rather than only the question, Chair. I mean, it does seem to me that providing a list of options that only restricts alcohol further, kind of leads us in a particular direction that I don't know that Council has resolved upon.
No, Tom, they don't. So some of the options are for the status quo.
Well, it's status quo or tightening. Status quo or tightening, all the way through, status quo or tightening. There's nothing that's status quo or easing. I'm not arguing in favour of easing. What I'm saying is that there is a sort of presumption in the paper, the direction, even if we only choose 2 or 3 of these, the direction is to tighten, to restrict alcohol sales in a city that already has actually quite strict rules, given that we have ILT rather than supermarkets and so forth.
Doesn't cover the whole city, and it depends on a piece-by-piece basis. I understand what you're saying, but that's what a local alcohol policy is for, is to see what the community in that area thinks, and it may be that at the end of it people are comfortable for the status quo to remain, which is not more restrictive. I don't want to presuppose the outcome of that, but in some senses it is possible for us to enlarge. We did have licensing that went through in some cases, I think, until 7 a.m. through the night, until we reached an accord for 3 a.m. closing. And interestingly, because I was involved in that process, interestingly, the unexpected bonus of that was a tremendous reduction in inner city harm. But if people wanted to come forward and suggest that those nighttime hours are extended beyond 3 a.m, it would be a select number of operators that were interested in doing so. And I'm also not sure that there's a heck of a lot of money in it at that hour of the night. Rhiannon?
Just adding to this conversation, it's probably worth noting that we have gone out to a wide group of stakeholders, which did include Hospitality New Zealand, who have responded, as well as others with an interest in the direction that you're talking about, Deputy Mayor, so Great South and ILT as well. We haven't yet had a response from them. So the suggestions for options are coming from those that have already responded, and they are just to further explore from an engagement perspective rather than to set them in the policy at this point. Just some background to the discussion.
Nobby?
It'd be helpful for those listening, and if you could just clarify the off-licence terminology. So it's off-licence
Bottle store.
The bottle stores. So we've really got 2 of those, ILT and supermarkets, haven't we?
We don't have no, there can be private bottle stores, Bottle-O and Ototaras, an off-licence private one.
Can some of the
Full Square and
can some of the
Ototaras.
supermarkets
We don't have it in supermarkets in
Deliver?
Invercargill, but the Four Square and Bluff, I think, has an off licence. And Ototara, sorry, that's right too. But not the major supermarket chains. And yes, they do have that in Dunedin, but that's the Act rather than the local alcohol policy.
Thank you.
Grant.
Yeah, thanks. Just to clarify, so you've had feedback from the hospitality industry, you said. So how is their feedback reflected in the recommendations?
I'll let Hannah take that one.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So we received quite substantive feedback from Hospitality NZ as an organisation, and they had various concerns. The pertinent ones for these sort of very early exploring of the options are referenced in this report. I'm just looking again at the feedback we've had from Hospitality NZ. They advocate, for example, maintaining current trading hours, which is one of the options put up as a discussion point. Some of their more specific concerns, again, weren't really relevant for this early discussion, and obviously the final report and the final draft is going to include everybody's feedback in far more detail. At this stage, it's really if the appetite from this committee is to explore an option, then the level of attention it's going to receive in the report or the level of extra feedback we might seek is consequently greater. But all options and all feedback will be fully detailed in the final report.
Evelyn.
Just a comment, I think, more than anything, that this paper highlighted to me things that I had not previously even known occurred. So I've had a discussion, but I thought I'd highlight it. Restriction on buy now, pay later. Now, I did not ever in my lifetime envisage that people afterpaid alcohol. However, when I thought about it, and I thought about the other thing which talked about mandatory age checks on purchase and delivery, if we're talking about the fact that post-COVID we live in an era where more people buy these sorts of products online where afterpay or something like that is perhaps an option, and certainly delivery is an option, there's no guarantee that the person ordering or receiving the alcohol might be the person who's going to consume the alcohol. But, you know, so that some of the control on licensed premises that exist or at a bottle store. But the buy now, pay later, if we're talking about our responsibility as community leaders in harm reduction, that horrified me. And so if we're looking at this consultation document, the fact that a lot of people will be like me and totally unaware of that as a possibility, just to highlight where harm occurs and how it creeps out. And for those people who have worked in social services and the harm industries or the harm services, I think that is a trend that if we have an ability to influence it as the grandparents of the upcoming generation, perhaps that is our responsibility, even if we do look like a bit like wowsers.
It would be a greater responsibility, and here's where I'll slap the government back after having spent a couple of days being spanked by them last week, of all major parties to actually build a better act. Because the initial proposal for what became the 2012 Act did more to potentially address harm, but went to steps that none of the major political parties were prepared to try and endorse. And by that, it was looking at the Australian option of where it's actually more expensive to buy from an off-licence and take away than it is to drink at a licensed premise. And that, first of all, drinking at a licensed premise means you're supervised, so it minimises harm. It doesn't mean that you can't buy alcohol to take home, it just means there's a bit more of a cost to it, but nobody went for that. The online world has created a situation with, I guess, real concerns that I've seen from the start of this triennium, because I wasn't completely aware that the food delivery companies were able to take alcohol with them, knowing full well that the highly paid drivers that they engage, and that is completely facetious, will of course uphold their obligations and check the age of everybody that they're serving to. No, they're not going to. And even then, I'm still not clear as the chair of the DLA with whom the responsibility for ensuring the age is legit sits. Is it the venue from which the order is placed, or is it the delivery agency through which the order goes? So it's ambiguous. I share your points about Afterpay, but at the same time, there's a part of me that goes, yeah, if I was looking to buy a box of Hieketsu, throwing it on Afterpay doesn't make a great deal of sense. But if I was organising an engagement party, and so there's a matter of scale, I think, that comes in there, that type of thing might be useful. But again, these are issues that'll hopefully come up during the consultation. I think it's also worth remembering that this part of the country, our district, has one of the highest rates of alcohol harm. It's not our job to be wowsers, but it is our responsibility to try and look after people, and that's why we go through this process every couple of years. There is a change in the time period, I think, that we're looking at moving forward, that means that the reviews won't be happening over an election period, which is useful. But we'll go through each of the points. Sorry, Barry?
I'm going to clarify, it's got restrictions on single sales. What does that mean?
Well, can we cover that off when we get to it? Because I have a question about that too. Nobby?
I just had a clarification on the same thing, similar thing again, on the restricting the consumption of alcohol on the footpath. So do we have some tolerance for that at the moment?
Yes. So whilst we have an alcohol ban in the CBD for people to be wandering the streets drinking from an open vessel, there are some designated areas outside licensed establishments, and from memory we've got 4: Glassines, the Tuatara, Spates Ale House and the Langlands Hotel, where they do have a clearly designated area which is to 1.5 metres out from the building. The question, I think, is looking at, do we examine the scenario that exists in other towns, say like Courtenay Place in Wellington, where there's lots of people drinking outside until way past 11. I'm not sure that it's been an issue, but happy to see where the consultation takes us. Sorry, Steve.
Oh, thanks, you. Yeah, I guess it's just a process question for me. Just some clarity, I guess. I thought we would have been given some kind of report or summary of the feedback from the key stakeholders, and going into this and giving some direction, knowing that some of those key stakeholders haven't given voice to this. For me, I'm just a bit uneasy about giving that direction to things that I don't know that I have a full understanding about, based on a lack of that feedback summary.
Sometime at this point, pre-consultation is not a rigorous process unless you're the medical officer of health. Everybody has the chance to have their say, and so there'll be some who won't pipe up at this point, but we'll wait to see what it is that we come forward with, and we'll submit on that. Really, at this point, we're looking at those stakeholders and going, what over the past several years of this policy have you seen that works, doesn't work, what could be changed? The breakdown and feedback will come when we get to the actual submission stage and people make formal submissions, and then there's a summary of it. Brianna.
Just to add further detail to that point, this is very much a process paper. This is not the full paper with all of the submissions. We're only bringing it to you for for two reasons. When we indicated in the earlier paper a few months ago, we suggested we may come back at this part in the process if either ourselves or Southern District Council from an issue perspective thought that two policies might be appropriate, so to update you on that policy matter. And then also because of the advice from the Medical Officer of Health around the process itself. And so in response to that advice, that's why we're providing that highlight on the new issues that have come up. And should we seek further feedback, so just to reassure yourself and all councillors, you will receive all the submissions and the detailed analysis of all issues. This is simply, do you want us to seek further feedback on specific new options? It's in order to provide that surety that you have heard from everyone as far as possible, because we think that potentially some other stakeholders also may not have thought about some of these issues which have been raised through this early part of the process.
Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, would it be helpful if I moved 1, 2B and 3, and then we've got 4 separately to discuss?
Yep.
Happy
I'll second
to do
that. I did. Enthusiastically. Forgive my enthusiasm, Fire. Open for discussion. I'll put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now under 4, we'll go through each thing individually. So trading hours for off licences. So by way of explanation, when somebody has an off licence, the amount of money that they pay for it is based on a risk profile. The risk profile reduces along with the hours. And so currently you can have an off licence open until 11 o'clock at night. Most aren't, because no one around buying at that time. Lord only knows how we used to survive when they closed at 9 o'clock and weren't open on a Sunday. But we did. It was called planning. But if somebody, even though they could have an off licence open until 11 o'clock at night, said, actually, we don't need it until 10 o'clock in the morning through until 9 o'clock at night, the risk profile that they then have as a business is less, and the amount of the licence reduces as well. So it becomes actually a business decision. So if you have the current permissive 7 to 11, that's fine. I can guarantee you'll get submissions from people saying it should be reduced. But the operators can choose to reduce. And even if somebody has a licence that says that they can trade till 11 o'clock, many of them are closed from 9. So that's what A is about. Does it stay where it is from 7 to 11? Do we look at shortening them from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. or reducing them even further from 9 till 9? So I'm interested to know where this committee sits on that. Nobby?
Look, I'd be supportive of the 9 till 9 in light of Medical Officer of Health had to say about our consumption rates, restricting that down. And I suspect that if we were to ask ILT, they'd probably have very little trade after 9 p.m, I would think, as early as 7 o'clock in the morning.
Tom?
I was just going to ask whether we have any data that suggests that there are problems with individuals who are purchasing alcohol between 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning?
Problems. It's a matter, again, it's a business decision, and businesses who want to open at 7 a.m. will tell you that they're capturing night shift workers who are on their way home, wanting to buy something to have when they get home.
So if you're a 12-hour day shift worker, for example, as many people are, you'll actually never catch an off-licence open. I mean, I suspect that's why hours are extended, actually, is to allow for people who work shifts.
Short answer is yes. That was what the bulk of submissions for the first local alcohol policy talked about, mostly shift workers and contractors. But again, it's a business decision. Currently 7 till 11. Trish?
I support that decision.
Which one? Sorry?
The 7 to 11. I believe that the business operators know their clients and know what the practice is, and if there's less risk that they can, by reducing them, because they have that ability to do so, I think that's what I would like to go for.
I don't think they do it out of risk. I think they do it out of commercial necessity and benefit from the lower risk profile. But yeah, okay, thank you. Rangi.
Thanks, Chair. I support comments made by both Councillor Ward and Campbell regarding we don't have the information from the punters involved, and we're at risk of making decisions that affect a lot of people, and we know nothing about. So in that case, I always revert to the status quo. And if there is a problem, no doubt Mr. Policeman will come to us and say, as they have in the past, and you'll know that the police have raised issues, that there are problems and we address them then. But at the moment, I'm happy to go through this entire list as the status quo.
Remembering we're not making decisions, this is just about what we're going to go out and consult on, but appreciate the feedback. So status quo. Evelyn.
I am in favour of 9 till 9. One of the rare instances where Kormato and I agree. I think it's after most people are in school. It's also about example. I am quite concerned that we're seen as being restrictive of business if we say 7 a.m, but the days when people used to go to the one available establishment in town at 7 o'clock when they came off shift, 7 o'clock in the morning, are long gone. We've moved away from that culture, and I think...
These are bottle stores specifically.
I know, but I think the same thing applies, the sort of on the way home picking up, going for a drink. I think that time has passed. 9 till 9, I think, works for most people, and it is probably the risk profile that most businesses are going for.
Tom, could I just clarify from you where you were leaning? Tom? Sorry, where were you? You asked a question, but you didn't really give any...
I think we should leave it as principally for shift workers.
Thank you. Ria?
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm actually of the same concerns that Steve brought up earlier. However, I'm supporting leaving it as it is. I think that when we travel around the world and we're in kura lounges, for instance, it doesn't matter what time of day you are on, people are just having a bubbles before they get on a plane, but mind you, most people do. So I don't want to be the Grinch of hospitality, and I think a lot of our establishments are very, very good at supervising what's going on within their businesses.
Status quo, Ria, is that what you're saying? Thank you. Leslie?
Thanks, Mr Chair. Look, being conscious that the New Zealand Health Survey makes it quite clear that Southland has the highest prevalence of heavy episodic drinking, at least weekly, in any region of New Zealand, and also being conscious that at least 80%, if not over 80% of alcohol was purchased from off licences. My feeling on this one is that we should at least raise the question of further restriction on those off licence hours, and the 9 to 9 is the second suggestion is only really reducing by an hour. The 9 to 9 is the one to really get the comments on. And I do just add, and it's clear in the report we have in front of us, that there's been a trend across the country for those off-licence hours to be reduced so that 9 o'clock is the latest closing time. And look, you're looking at that having already happened in Auckland, Christchurch, Gisborne, Hauraki, Timaru, Waimate, Matamata, Pororua, Thames, Coromandel and Wairoa. There's a lot of very heavy New Zealand tourist areas included in areas that have already got their LAPs changed. So I think at least we should be raising the issue. and getting more data from ourselves and more feedback from our various constituents around this issue.
Thanks,
I think
Leslie.
just sticking with the status quo, I think here's our chance to actually explore this issue further responsibly.
Thank you. I mean, I look forward to the data coming in when we get a policy out for consultation, and ideally hope that the data that we get from presentations to hospitals is specific to our area, because it wasn't previously, because the DHB's area takes in Dunedin, which is a university town, and Queenstown, which again is a place of its own. Now, in drawing those comparisons, I'm not saying that there's not alcohol harm here, but there's an entirely different climate. Steve?
Oh, yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, like I understand we've had some insights into alcohol use in Invercargill and really value that. I guess I just lean towards status quo based on, like, I'm concerned around what we would be informing these decisions on. Our own opinions here today, or so I just want community voice on this. So while I think the option should be raised, my concern is that I'm not coming with a real sense of community voice on this from those stakeholders, and that's what I'll be using to inform my direction, I guess.
Thank you. Barry?
Yeah, I'm in favour of the status quo. I think being an ex-shift worker, I'm very much in favour of just leaving it the way it is.
Thanks, Barry. Grant?
Status quo. I think we need more information and don't need to make too many judgments ill-informed.
Peter?
The way it's operating at the moment, I'll go with the status quo.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. That gives us an indication that we'll go out with the trading hours remaining at 7 to 11. And I appreciate the comments around reduction of harm and also around provoking some responses. I hope I know that there still will be one way or the other. Expanding the definition of sensitive premises to include healthcare facilities, marae, Whale Pacifica. First of all, because there's two parts to this, where did that come from, Hannah?
That specific recommendation, it certainly came from the Medical Officer of Health and I believe also from Alcohol Health Watch, off the top of my head.
I mean, I have no great issue with it, but I think it comes back to the point that I made when Councillor Pottinger asked the question earlier. Existing rights prevail. So if there's already a licensed premises in the area and that a healthcare facility is built nearby within the prescribed distance, there's no obligation for an existing user to have to consult with the healthcare premise. So there's two parts to this. Are you interested in expanding it first of all? Tom, then Evelyn.
Through you, Chair. I note that the way that this one is worded, there actually is no status quo option. So it's
expanding. So the status quo is to not expand.
But there is no option of that. It's and or each time, and or if you select either and or, you end up with other than.
But I'll remind you that
quo.
Recommendations are merely a suggestion. They're a recommendation. We can make our own ones up. So just because it says expanding the definition doesn't mean that we have to. We can choose not to. Evelyn?
Yes, so in some ways there's two different things in here. There is the precautionary thing if legislation should change, because we have got a discussion about somewhere in here about the private members bill and the demolition of licensing trusts. There's a part of my brain that says that having a broader definition of a sensitive area might be a positive thing to stop us being caught unprepared, but it's also recognising that in some of our areas, because not all of the city is covered by ILT, that the potential for new businesses to be established to sell alcohol in areas that could be proximate to a school or a health facility or a marae or whatever is actually there. 50 metres is not very far. If I look at, if you crossed Ellis Road, for example, you would just about be out the 50 metres by the time you got to the other side of a premises that could be established in proximation. So, does it cost us anything to do this? Or is it drawing to people's attention that there are some issues that might arise should some of our more enterprising businesses be able to expand their activities with the change of other legislation, and what would be impacted by that?
So to answer your question, I think from memory the current definition of sensitive premises is around religious facilities and schools.
And this is introducing
and it's not a ban.
Yeah.
It's just a requirement to consult. And an example of that would have been Invercargill Pizzeria in Windsor with the church immediately adjacent. Just one church? Right. Yes. And so they were identified as an interested party and certainly took the opportunity to submit. It did not prevent, it just meant that firstly that they were made aware and needed to be consulted with. That said, I think there's an entirely different profile between a cafe restaurant that sells alcohol and a pub or a bottle store. Actually, a bottle store has people taking away, so I understand what you're saying. Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just for clarity, and because the Deputy Mayor raised it, I just wanted to say at the start, the current local alcohol policy, as you said, has got the sensitive premises definition as schools and other childcare facilities, places of religious gathering, any residential activity, so that's dwelling or apartment, and community facilities, and it's a 50-metre restriction. My feeling on this one is that yes, it is probably time to look at the widening of the definition, and 50 metres is not much. I used to be a runner in my youth. There wasn't a 50-metre race, there was a 100-metre race. 50 metres is not much. 100 metres you might say is not much either, but it's probably more realistic in this day and age than 50 metres was. So I think from my point of view, yes, we do have a status quo, and I've just read it out for everybody's clarity. But I do think that it is, again, a good time to look at both expanding the definition of the sensitive premise and also looking at that 50 metres being extended to 100 metres.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. I should point out actually that licence application that I referred to that went to hearing also included consultation with the residences behind. So, Trish.
I look at this the same as the previous one. I don't have enough information and we haven't got the engagement yet. So I would like to make an amendment that we keep the status quo.
There's no amendment yet, there's nothing there. But you're advocating, you're advocating for the status quo.
Oh, absolutely. So
okay.
Is this not... Okay.
I'm taking a vote yet, I'm just going around the table.
All right, yep.
Nobby.
Just wanted to clarify that where a business currently meets a requirement of 50 metres but wouldn't meet the 100 metres, are they then prohibited?
Existing rights prevail.
Grandparenting, it's called.
Yep. If you think about Botolo and the Otatara preschool, they're just across the road from each other. Yep. At a squeeze, it's probably 50 metres.
Wouldn't affect in that instance because both places exist currently. It would be if a new place wanted to establish, and essentially it's on new licensed premises wanting to establish if something has been built in that area in the meantime, if there's a new place or an existing place, and the whatever distance prevails.
I guess one of the issues I have is a wider issue that you can understand a school being included as sensitive because you don't want kids going into a bottle store or anything similar, but a preschool that's got kids up to, what, 4.5, 5, unlikely to purchase, wouldn't have the money. Could legally go there if their parents took them anyway.
I don't think it's the kids themselves, because one would hope that the person serving would notice a 5-year-old. Probably the caregiver. But actually, originally the discussion was around alcohol advertising and exposure to brands in front of young people. That was the point that was made nationally in the first instance. I'm not sure I've got a clear lean on where we're heading, whether you're looking to expand or not. 2 for, 2 against, and 1 ambivalent.
Just for the benefit of...
Sorry.
I'm in favour of the suggestions from Councillor Soper about extending out to 100 metres and going with the status quo.
Okay. Ring.
Status quo. Status quo. Sorry.
Grant. Barry. Steve. Okay, we've got a pretty clear indication on that. So we delete B. We go across to C. The first bullet point is restriction on single sales. And while I understand the intention of that, I think the market, it's a personal view, I think the market has changed in that people might go in and buy 1 or 2 craft beers, for example. Or what this doesn't say is whether it's single sales of bottles of beer or single bottles of wine or a single bottle of good malt whiskey. Because I don't want to go. I don't want to go in and buy 6 bottles of Black Label. Thank you, because I'll be broke.
You can afford 1 bottle of gin at a time.
You could use your afterpay.
I'll get it on Deliver Easy. Is Evelyn?
Is this a hark back to the days where you had to have an accumulated amount of things, so you could go and buy different things that made up to 12 bottles, but and that was the old Wilson Neal days. So is this a hark back to that, or is this a whole different argument? Because I would have thought, apart from beer, that we would not be limiting quantity. But then I'm old-fashioned. I'm used to people buying beer by a half a dozen or a dozen. I'm not sure how comfortable I am with single bottles of beer. That's probably a cultural thing, but as in the time I grew up in. But what's driving this particular discussion?
I'm not sure, but I'll come to Rhiannon for that in a moment. But it's also worth noting that the strength of some beers is approaching wine level.
Right.
So it really is a depends. Sorry, Rhiannon.
Forgive my innocence.
I was just going to suggest, Chair, because really just reiterating again, we're not asking for a specific decision on these matters. We're simply saying these have been raised through the early engagement, and do you want to explore them further? So would it help this discussion if Hannah just briefly summarises what the submission raised made this point for? It is covered in the report, but it might just help. She could move through each bullet and just explain why was single sales raised, etc. Just a 2-sentence overview.
It is in the report, but I'm actually interested in hearing what it is that the elected representatives have to say. I trust that they've read the report. Ringy?
Look, backing up that single sales one, it's quite interesting actually, and I think it actually shows a lack of worldly sort of what's happening You go into a bottle store, could be Centrepoint, could be Windsor or one like that. You go to the fridge, and all the classy craft beers in the 440ml cans are individual. And if you want to buy 4 of them, you've got to get a bag and put them in. They aren't packaged in bulk, because you're dead right when you said about the alcohol content. Now, it would be irresponsible buying a 6-pack of something 14% or 10% or something. So the way the craft beer manufacturers actually tempt you to buy one beer, maybe another one, and you try them. And I think it's a very managed and controlled way to drink, and I can't see where the single sales is coming from.
Yeah. I mean, I understand its origins in cheap single sales in areas of high deprivation. And the people who fall victim to that are not going to be spending $20 a can or bottle for a high-end craft beer.
Sorry, all those cheaper beers are in a box, and I doubt that a Liquorland would break open a 12-pack and take one out for you. I doubt that.
We could give it a crack. I'm sensing no appetite for it. Limiting alcohol-related exterior signage, we'll strike that first one, thanks. Limiting alcohol-related exterior signage and advertising. Again, that was feedback that we've had, and I'm comfortable with where it is currently, but I'm really interested in getting that more data through feedback through the submission process when it goes out. So I'm not closed off to those restrictions. But again, I also don't see the same proliferation of signage here that we do in other urban areas. And as an observation, and as the DLC chair, it's a benefit of being a trust area. And that's not blowing smoke up the trust, it's just a fact. We don't have proliferation of bottle stores, so we don't have 5 booze warehouses beside each other with 30 metres of signage outside each of them, because that is a reality in some parts of the country, but it's not something we have. They certainly have it outside their outlets. Bottle-O really go to town with a number of signs that they put up on the side of the road, and I think we might like to check the terms of their resource consent around that sometimes. But and then there's more elegant electronic signage that's come out. So is there any support for leaving that in to provoke a response or not? None? Okay. Mandatory age checks on purchase and delivery, which is something I'd love to see, but I'm not sure how we enforce it. Like, it's a real frustration with where the responsibility sits and whether or not someone's going to do it. Nobby.
So I recently purchased some alcohol from Gore because I was looking for a particular bottle of whiskey, and there was no check on how old it was. But
sorry, that was a bit unkind.
A bit unkind, yeah. But the balance was, all the courier companies will not deliver unless you can produce a +18 card. So if you take a bottle of wine out, it's got a sticker on it that says +18. You go to the door, you knock it, teenager comes out, give us some ID that you're 18, no, take it away. Tell your mum to come and get it from the depot or whatever. So if ILT are doing any deliveries, as long as they applied that +18, then that would be an okay way. It doesn't matter who orders it, it's who receives it, where the damage is. Because if you order it, you're obviously paying for it.
It's the food delivery agencies that I think are the issue here, rather than, say, a bottle store with a truck heading in a particular direction. Ria?
Yes, I think it's very good that the courier drivers did do that in the instance, me, Clark. But I'm also aware from members of the public that that hasn't been the case when they have had alcohol delivered through different food agencies. It's ambiguous, because the law says that the person paying for a product is the person that's in charge of that sale for a customer to delivery. So it's the, on this half of the table it'd be the ILT, on the other half it could be the taxi driver. So it is ambiguous, and I think that because we do know of instances where children have received alcohol being at home, parents are away, or 16-year-olds. It is really concerning that there isn't more tightening up to make sure that it doesn't get left behind.
Again, it's the burden of online delivery. Are you over 18? Yes.
You just click the thing. Yeah.
I'm just not sure where legally the responsibility lies, because it's the sale and supply. So
Well,
there's
if they
actually two
uploaded
parts to the act.
Yeah.
And from that intent, I would suggest that both the retailer and the supply agency, the delivery company, are both liable. Are they going to do it? Are we going to follow every Deliver Easy and Uber Eats person around to check?
I mean, they should be able to upload the ID from the person that making the sale with that money is changing hands. You know, that's one way that they could look at improving that risk or de-proving it.
Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree with you that it's the food agencies and the Uber and other ride-sharing agencies that are the issue here, not the general courier companies. And mandatory age checks, even if the actual possibility is there in our LAP that you will be asked, to my mind, it is better than not being there. Yes, I agree with you, the enforcement could be a little interesting, but the fact that we actually have it in the LAP that a mandatory age check is at least possible in those circumstances, it's better than not having it there, in my opinion.
Okay, Tom?
This is actually the only one on the list that I would support, Chair, even allowing for the fact that it's very difficult to enforce. I think it becomes the accountability, quite simply, the vendor. I take your point here about the driver too, but I think it's their accountability to make sure that the person who's buying alcohol is overage. I don't think that's for us to solve that problem for them. So I would support that one.
Okay. So we're leaning towards leaving that in. Which is good. What about restrictions on buy now, pay later? That's the afterpay.
That's like Visa. Every time you use Visa, you're using a buy now, pay later. Everybody uses Visa.
What?
Every time you
got 30 days before it costs you money. Leslie?
On this one, I would support the restrictions. It's fairly well known that the afterpay is widely, and if we could go as far as to say increasingly used by young adults, I think that there is a good argument for saying that this one is a sensible addition.
Evelyn?
I concur with Councillor Soper. I think that this is something that we need.
Ringy?
So is that saying you cannot have an account with a bottle store?
No, you can't use a buy now, pay later scheme. Well,
Sorry.
yeah, I mean that's to Tom's point. I guess.
You get a monthly bill and you pay it on the 20th.
So I guess the drafting something to go out if we were to impose it or try to impose it, you really get into having to mention brand names like Afterpay and Zip.
You just change their name.
And somebody new comes up in the interim. It is fraught. Grant.
I think it's overreach.
Steve?
Yeah, I tend to agree on that one. Where's the line?
Harry? Peter?
I just ordered for an organisation 2 pallets of alcohol worth about $4,000 just recently, and that's pay later because the organisation I ordered on behalf of has an account with the supplier. I've got no problem with that. I'm very sure that most people, most places like whether it be either ILT or the bottle store at the White House, they wouldn't be sending out alcohol to people they do not know.
Trish?
I think we can't have that, but I understand the intention is the afterpay, but as you said, if you name one thing, then what happens if others come in? So I don't think we can do that.
Okay, we've got a pretty strong indication that we don't go on that. Restrictions on glass containers. Now, this is so ambiguous. What the intent of this is, and I expect this would be fleshed out in how it's worded, is we'd put a condition in place around the Bluff Oyster and Seafood Festival this year that there were no glass containers, and that's becoming the standard for outdoor events, and I think that's what's missing.
Yep.
So we're not saying we don't want glass. Restrictions on glass containers at outdoor special events is probably where we want to be, and a degree of consistency, and we would be consistent with what's going on in other areas. Bearing in mind that we ran a process that supported that, it'd be fair to say where I sit. Is anybody opposed to restrictions on glass containers at outdoor special events?
Sorry, isn't this about alcohol takeaway facilities?
Nope.
So this would apply to cafes?
No, I'll start this one again, Tom. It's for outdoor events, special outdoor events. So the Bluff Oyster Festival, Christmas at the races, Burt Munro, not standard operations. So restriction, and that was the problem that arises from the way it's worded. It should be restrictions on alcohol in glass containers at special outdoor events.
So we don't have that authority at the moment?
We do have the authority, but we have to impose it specifically, whereas what we're seeking to do is to make it the standard, so that all applicants understand that that's what they're going to have to do.
Yeah.
It would save them coming to a hearing.
So includes Rugby Park. They expect 10,000 people there on Saturday week, and all they're sold out in the field or in the booths, all in cans, all cans. Yep. And it works, but you see, you reduce glass because people can use glass as a weapon or a missile, but a full can of beer can do more damage to a person too if it hits them in the head in the right.
If it hasn't been decanted, yes, and if it's particularly well aimed,
you can clip it open and then still fire it. I've witnessed it.
Anything can be a weapon.
Those are the good
Rugby
old
Park
days.
though, surely, Peter.
No, they do.
Not at Rugby Park.
Definitely not. No, Carisbrook it was.
Ah, geez, you're dating yourself there, Rangy.
The broken glass.
When you finish the can, you crush it on your forehead.
Okay, is that what happened?
Yes.
In the old days, right?
Is Peter suggesting we bottle a togo?
Sorry?
The broken glass on the ground, Peter, might be actually damaging to other parts of the anatomy that a crushed can would not.
So restrictions on glass containers at
If you got
special outdoor events is how that'll read.
if someone had a beer bottle of stubby and smashed it and used that as a weapon, it can happen. A number of years ago, I'll use the name of the product, DB, at a big cricket match in Queenstown, and the oval there, people were going by DB stubby, and they didn't know until they purchased it, it was actually DB done a run of plastic stubbies. That happened
Actually, just
throughout both islands, actually.
because we haven't, if I can bring us back onto the point rather than a history lesson, or malicious gossip, which I'm all up for. Special events is probably what it should read.
Yeah.
Because some of them can be indoor as well.
Yeah.
So if somebody is applying for a license for a special event, they know that there's no glass. Cool. Thank you for that. Designating all bottle stores as supervised, which essentially means that they need to be staffed, which it's a depends. I mean, we can put it in there and see what the industry and hands come back with, because some of them have bottle stores adjoining, and the someone will move from a bar through to. Is that enough? You would expect again that it's a business decision. If they knew that it was going to be a busy day, that they'd have staff in both. Hannah, do you want to provide a little light on that? On the designation of as supervised for bottle stores?
Yeah, my understanding is that what that refers to is that children under 18 can't be in there unsupervised. So it's not about staffing per se. It's about whether children can wander in. So a bar, generally speaking, a kid can't wander up to the bar by themselves. But this would be whether an off-license, a bottle store, children would be able to be there unaccompanied.
You'd hope they weren't. Happy for them to be designated as supervised doesn't mean they can't come in, just means they're with their folks, which is sometimes a parental supervision thing. I could leave the kids in the car slitting each other's throats, metaphorically, or I could bring them with me. So leave that in. Restriction of the consumption of...
Are we leaving that one in? I mean, that could have a significant impact on shops that have to actually employ somebody just to stand in part of the shop that's got alcohol. And we try to solve a problem that does not actually exist for us.
So I'm going to come back, Tom, to the fact that this is just what we're going to go out and get feedback on.
Well, but the implication is that we are recommending it, I think. I mean, it would seem to me that, normally we get to, when we go out to ask for the public's opinion, we usually have a series of recommendations, don't we? Our preferred position or a preferred option. I mean, are we saying that this is our preferred option?
We're not presenting options, we're presenting a draft policy, so there won't be options in it.
So are we saying that we're recommending this as a draft policy?
We're not recommending it, we're opening it for submissions. So, a submitter who, and it would obviously be industry that will come back with feedback. It would be interesting to see what they had to say. It doesn't mean that we go ahead with that. It's provoking a response. I guess we've looked at a couple of that. I'll go around the table again. Anna are out. Evelyn.
I'm in.
Leslie.
Definitely agree with this one.
Ria. Trish. Ringy.
Status quo.
Right.
Isn't it the law currently that you can't be in a licensed facility under the age of 18?
Well, you can if you're with someone.
If you're with that's what it says. So
And this
unless
is,
you're supervised.
Exactly. That's.
So
but
why
we're clarifying
aren't we
that is the
relitigating law
position.
that's already in place, so I'm against it.
Okay. Nobby.
I'm opposed.
Status quo for me.
Tom, status quo. Peter.
Same for me, status quo.
Sorry.
Aaron,
Status quo.
when I said no, I meant this.
I realised that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we delete that. Restricting consumption of alcohol on the footpath to end at 11 p.m. I've seen anybody outside after that period of time, Rangi?
Just some clarity. The footpath, to me, from a legal point of view, is outside someone's property. It's council's footpath. Is that right?
Okay, so to clarify, when it goes into the policy, it would be restricting the consumption of alcohol on the footpath in a designated area.
Okay, so say, for example, is it Tuatara have seats outside?
Yes.
Okay, and that's on
That's
council.
a designated area.
Right, but the other places that are off the footpath but adjacent, they're okay?
do you
They're still
mean?
outdoors, but they're not technically on footpaths. They're on
I'll go
private
through the
land.
4 places again that are currently doing it. Glassines, Tuatara, Spates and Langlands.
So it only applies to council footpaths?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
And within the CBD, where there's a liquor ban outside that designated area. Nobby.
So how does Langlands have a footpath? I mean, I know they've got that area you can walk into where they have the heaters going, but that's... So you're suggesting that out around the footpath around Langlands, people can be...
So where the tables are outside Brood, they actually have signage up on the concrete pillars saying no drinks past this point.
Okay.
Wouldn't apply to the alleyway down to Niche, because that's on their land anyway, it's not a footpath. But actually the Langlands do a good job of designating where their area is. Cool. Barry?
Yeah, with the Working Men's Club, if you're upstairs in the Corinthian room, there's signage at the door coming in that you're not allowed to take it.
Yeah, because it's not a designated area. However, this is on designated areas, footpaths, CBD, or CBD and South City. So in or out, Evelyn? So that's in favour of it? Okay. Leslie?
I'd like to see people's comments on, the public's comments on this one, because as it says, this is about balancing with the promotion of the inner city and South City vibrancy.
Yep.
I'd be interested to see the comments.
So in?
Yep.
Ria?
In.
Trish? Ringy?
Just my ignorance. The current one, what is it? Is 11?
Apparently there isn't one.
Ah.
The status quo is that we wouldn't have that. It's the terms of their licence unless stipulated in their licence, and I'll use the example of Glassines, which does have a maximum time at night that they're allowed to be outside, since we just went through that process with them recently.
Right, so each has currently a different curfew. Each trading establishment.
Glassines is the only one that I'm aware of that has a curfew.
Right, okay. I guess, yeah, I'm open to public feedback, yes.
So that's a yes?
Yeah, for public feedback,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Grant?
So this would be where there's a licence that restricts them to the footpath.
Yep.
It would,
Yep.
currently they can go,
Well, it depends on the venue.
yeah.
So I've got one that has to finish at a prescribed time, and the others I don't think have to from memory. Bobby?
So, if you think Spades has got tables outside, do they close later than 11 p.m?
Yes. But
somewhere along the line, we'd have to say you have to be out of that designated area by 11 o'clock and back inside.
Oh, so they don't have that. They have a designated area outside. There's no curfew on it. At the moment, though, from my observation, they don't let people out the front to drink later on. People will go out and vape and smoke, and vape and smoke-free CBD. But
yeah, so I'm in favour.
But that's how they choose to police
Yep.
it. Yep.
Yep.
So are you supporting 11? Barry? Okay, Steve?
I'll support this one.
Yeah, if a group of people were at a show at the Civic Theatre and it finished at 11:15, let's go down the street to a caf bar, do a bit of a fresco dining, have a drink. They hadn't been drinking beforehand. They're doing no harm. What's wrong with allowing them to drink till later than 11 p.m? I don't have a problem with it.
Okay.
Side.
Yeah, they can still drink and enter.
A footpath, yeah. Hot summer's night.
I asked the question. Overwhelmingly, the support is for restricting the consumption in those designated areas to 11 p.m. And I think that gets us there. So remembering we haven't made decisions, we've helped to design the document that goes out. So with those alterations to 4, I'll move those. Seconded Trish. Put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for your discussion on that. I really appreciate it. I'm going to change the agenda around a little bit and jump to tab 15, which is the Youth Council's July report, and ask Levi and Nargis. Welcome along. Lovely to see you both.
Lovely to be here.
Ngā mihi o te ahi. I'm Nargis, and here with me is Levi. We're two of the chairs from Youth Council 2025, and we're super excited to share our July report with the committee. Starting off with the water wall giveaway, at the end of the annual plan consultation, we did a poll on social media to ask the community on what they would like to do with the water wall, and the majority that we got was to donate it to the Learning Centre of the Blue Duck Early Learning Centre in Waihopai. So we did that, and 2 of our youth counsellors, Ella and Kez, donated it, and we had a few photographers, took some amazing photos, and got to connect with the little ones.
Yeah, so the water wall was initially for community events around the AP consultation earlier this year. It proved to be very effective in bringing people over to our stalls and getting them to write their own submissions and discuss the annual plan. And yes, we delivered the wall over at the Learning Centre.
Wasn't the best of days to drop it off, but
It was quite cold. But no, the kids loved it. We heard they were on it all day in their playground, and they've really embraced it, so that's awesome. Youth Council has also begun mission statement development, which is something new that we're trying out that we want to have for each consecutive Youth Council from next year. But yeah, last month our chairs proposed to the Youth Council members to work on a mission statement for the 2025 Youth Council to display and clarify the goals and purpose of this Youth Council and what topics we wish to be engaged with. So we note that we will work with each New Year's Youth Council membership on their unique mission statement that reflects their own goals and values. But from next year, we would like to start each Youth Council year with a mission statement workshop. So over our last couple of meetings, we've spent portions of time workshopping a 2025 mission statement, and we've got it ready here. So I quote, "The Invercargill City Youth Council is here for the rangatahi of our city, to listen, to speak up, and to make sure youth voices are part of the conversation. We're a group of young people passionate about shaping a city that works for us. Whether it's transport, our smoke-free CBD, safe youth spaces, or the environment, we bring youth perspectives to the table because decisions made today shape our tomorrow. We meet regularly, connect with our community, and work alongside the council to make sure youth are genuinely heard. Our aim is simple. Every young person in Invercargill feels seen, supported, and empowered to help build a better future."
that all. It's a long mission.
Boom.
Well done.
We will be posting that on our socials and hopefully getting more people involved with what Youth Council is doing, and just use this as a method of communication of what we're actually here for. We've also been working alongside with the council on a lot of the election year, as the election year is progressing. On the 21st of May, we got to talk to the Electoral Commission on a political neutrality workshop, and to make sure that all members remain politically neutral when working alongside Youth Council. And on 4th of June, we had Michael come to talk to us about how local body elections actually work and local governance. Through this, we split off into groups and talked about how we would like to be involved with the local election. And we had a few events lined up, such as a talent show or a workshop or a ice bucket challenge. But we have then shifted away to maybe like a virtual talent show. We're going to be in communication with comms to decide on an activity that works for all of us.
So yeah, those are a few of our ideas for like an election candidates project to garner interest around the election period and the candidates themselves. Next we have an update on Te Roro. So we did a transport workshop, or Te Roro did, over the last while to hear insights from rangatahi around barriers with transport locally. So Te Roro worked with rangatahi on planning possible solutions, and a few youth council members were able to take part in their final workshop. And from this, we've actually seen Uber launch in Invercargill, the driving service, and that's been heavily attributed to Te Roro's work and their community workshops.
Moving on from then, we've got our block takeover, which was another major success this year. Youth Council got to have their own stand, and the Electoral Commission provided Youth Council with a lot of resources and training to get young people enrolled to vote, both in local and national elections coming next year. Youth Council also held a previous meeting with Electoral Commission in which they were asking for feedback, and Youth Council asked them to be in schools so more youth can know about voting in local elections. And through that, we have seen electoral commissions come into schools, such as Girls High and Boys High, to get young people enrolled to vote. We also had a pom-pom voting poll to know what youth are wanting to see in the city and what they're most passionate about on what council does. And through that, we have got 78 votes for Splash Palace. Second is Clean Water with 44 votes, and then third is venues, such as the Civic Theatre in which we're in right now, Rugby Park Stadium with 39 votes.
That's pretty much our update. Our next steps from here on are preparing with the comms team for our election candidates project, as mentioned before. We'll also be preparing to host WasteNet to talk to the Youth Council about the upcoming solid waste consultation, which we hope to submit on as Youth Council. And next month, Youth Council will begin its processes for recruiting its 2026 membership by forming a recruitment committee and having Youth Council position advertisements starting in September.
Gosh, it goes quick, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Thank you. Councillors, open for questions. Evelyn?
Hiki o kōrua kua taumai ki te whakawhitiwhiti kōrero kia mātou. Thanks for coming today to tell us about what you've been up to. I've got a question. Now that you have been and it's July, and that you've got to your vision statement, mission statement, I'm wondering how you feel about how the term of Youth Council goes, given that you don't start till sort of the beginning of February. You're only just starting to get your feet on the ground. Have you given thought to how this could be managed differently? I know that this is not entirely within your gift, but it seems to me, as Youth Council is maturing, that you may be thinking about how it could be more effective for the voice of rangatahi. For instance, we have the councillors have a 3-year term. Should rangatahi have a 3-year term, so that you've got some continuity, that you're able to develop your policies, that your mission statement doesn't have to start afresh at the beginning of every year, all those sorts of things. Have you been discussing that, or do you not have time?
It isn't something we have been discussing, but it's...
Yeah, and also a major reason for our mission statement being so late is because of a lot of feedback that we heard from council and from Youth Council members was that they do not want to be involved with every submission, as they do not feel that it is beneficial, or they do not have an opinion on it as a council, which is why we decided to create the mission statement. If it was thought about earlier in the year, which we are thinking of doing in the upcoming years, it would have been done early, but regarding the term, we have not had a proper discussion about it as a council, and no one has brought it up, so maybe that could be a topic that we could ask the council members next time.
I think, Fire, the challenge is that you've got some members of the Youth Council who are in their last year at secondary school and are moving off to university or travel or what have you, but at the same time you've got 2 youth councillors sitting in front of you who've been there for a couple of years. And those who start young have the opportunity to progress through and be there for 3 or 4 years in some instances. So there is a degree of continuity. I think there was a relatively significant changeover this year, though, wasn't there?
Oh, there absolutely was. I think we had one of our biggest shift in new members for a while. But yes, the continuity for youth councillors like us who have been on for a while, we do give consideration to previous youth councillors and have them on to have that sort of experience and guide the other councillors. But we're always looking for fresh faces as well.
Yeah.
I guess there's the opportunity to take it back and discuss if you've got younger members who are joining, whether or not they have the chance to have an extended term. Some feedback from this meeting anyway. Trish?
Thanks very much. It was very, very impressive what you're doing. That's great. I'm wondering perhaps as part of your youth report, looking forward, you might measure it against your mission statement, seeing how close are you getting to what you want to do. I mean, we don't expect it all to happen, but it will be good to see where you're sitting.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's very good.
Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for coming in today. And this is not a question, but something of a compliment. One of my favourite issues of increasing voter turnout for local government elections. So congratulations on the work you've done so far and are going to continue with the enrolment and encouragement of young people to actually enrol and turn out for the local government election. It's great to see that you're actually thinking along those lines, especially with the latest decision from the UK that the voting age is going down to 16. This is the time to really have that encouragement, and it's great to see our youth council actually being involved in that way. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor.
The second matter, Mr. Chair, the water wall. I'm really pleased, and I'm sure all councillors are, that it's found a good home. But I did, seeing the Youth Council report just reminded me, did we actually thank our Parks team carpenter for the initiative, or our whole Parks team really, because I'm sure that it was the whole Parks team that devised it, for that initiative, because it was a very useful part of our consultations, and it has gone to a good home, and it was, how can I put it? Well, it was quite an initiative to have actually constructed something like this. It was thinking way outside the square to have come up with it as an innovative device, which has been very successful. So can we just perhaps record a thanks to our Parks team and the particular carpenter who was involved in the construction?
We can, and I see nodding heads in the appropriate space. They can take that back from both council and the youth council who had the ability to make use of it and pass it on. Thank you for that. Steve.
Thanks, Chair. The Chair will remind me this isn't a question, but I'm not sure.
No. The Chair will remind you that it's only during submissions and hearings that you must ask questions.
Awesome.
This is a meeting. Make a statement.
I'll make a statement then. I'm not sure whether it's been acknowledged, but I just, great work on the mission statement and your work with the Te Raro One transport conversation. But Nagus, I just wanted to congratulate you, your recent appointment as a youth MP in Youth Parliament. So that's awesome. And then Levi, I know you're doing awesome things on stage at the moment in Matilda. So you're busy. I'm sure you're excelling at school, but it's just great to have, just to acknowledge those two things as well. So well done.
Thank you.
And you were moving that we received that report?
Oh, yeah, I can move that.
Second that.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to come out from school and to present here today, and also see a part of our process as well.
Thank you so much for having us.
Councillors, it's been moved and seconded. I'll put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried. Goes back to tab 11, which is the Community Wellbeing Fund Review and Framework Update. Rhiannon, welcome back.
Kia ora. So yes, this is just the annual review and also recommendation from the committee just for a update to the framework. We've had a good response from those that have submitted to the fund, run a bit of a survey and included that feedback in the report. It's really been good over the last year, as with the year before, to see the awareness of the fund growing. The minor change to the framework that's being recommended by the committee is just around clarifying return of funding from events, just to make that clearer for submitters and to put a limit on that. And so that was the change that's proposed there. And then the committee's also thought about some other ways just to make the hearings more welcoming for everyone. But that's more just around how those meetings are run. So we do have a bit of an overview of the fund. It is attached to the report, but Gemma would be happy to go through that if you want to now.
Gemma, you have the floor.
Kia ora, thank you. Sorry, I must ask Michael if you can please scroll through the report as I go, please, because I don't have a clicker. Thank you. Great, so you can head to page 1, that'd be awesome. Thank you. We had an awesome uptake on the fund for 24-25, 43% up on the 22-23 year, so that's really great increase of applicants. You will see there's a bit of a breakdown across the sectors there. I won't go into it. The one that surprised the committee probably the most was that youth, in the youth space, there was a 50% reduction in allocations, but that also reflected the applications through the door, so it wasn't, for the committee, just that we weren't seeing those in this year on last. Next page, please, Michael. Thank you. So we saw a lot less events, 25 in the 24-25 year, as opposed to 31 last year, which was interesting, and a lot more operational. So that number was sitting at 25 last year, and we got 36. Capital projects, so that would be renovations or sports equipment, etc., things that people get to hold on to. That's still lowly around 10. Next page, please. Lovely. So we... I say we, the awesome Community Wellbeing Fund Committee, and my acknowledgement goes to them, 5 councillors and 4 community reps on that, supported events and projects for Down and Bluff, 16 that affected Invercargill and Bluff, and the rest were Invercargill based at 51. Thank you. You'll see that 586,859 was spent. That is up on the 565 allocation that was available last year due to a return of funds from a couple of grants which totaled close to 22,000. So that's why you're seeing more went out the door than was available, but that's because that money was returned from a previous financial year. Thank you, Michael. Oh, and just probably the next page would be lovely. You're all very familiar with that. This information goes up on our website once you have seen it, so that's what that's there for. Lovely, so yeah, that is a little bit of a breakdown across wellbeings. Similarly to other years, every project that was supported did score in the social wellbeing sector. The cultural wellbeing was up on previous years, but apart from that, the numbers are very similar. And the bit at the top just says what I said before about the return of funds upping their allocation this year. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll take any questions.
Tom.
Question, which actually may be for you, Chair, with the longest memory, but did the Community Wellbeing Fund exist prior to the introduction of the 4 Wellbeings in 2019?
No.
No?
No, so it was the Events Fund previously. The Community Wellbeing Fund was established in 2020.
Brought together previous funds that council had had.
Okay, I mean, it's difficult to avoid mentioning then the fact that we already know that the current government are introducing a bill to remove the 4 Wellbeings. That may mean nothing with respect to this, but I just wonder whether this is a time when we should be actually actively modifying the, the terms.
So
either reflect that,
yep,
or else just hold tight until we know what it's going to look like.
I guess the answer to that is we look at the language that we wrap around the reporting. As somebody who was here when we had the Wellbeings, and then we didn't, and then we did, and now we won't again, never actually changed what we did, just how we packaged it. Rhiannon.
You may recall that there was an adjustment made with this council. When we did the long-term planning, you made some minor adjustments to the ratios on the wellbeings, and the city centre focus continued. So it is very much structured around the council's vision and outcomes, which is why the city centre is there at the top. So no doubt the new council will also consider the vision and the outcomes as part of the next long-term planning process following the election. So you may wish to make some adjustments then.
And also worth recognising that the amount that the fund has been reduced as well. Trish.
I'd just like to acknowledge the work that Jem has done. As part of the feedback that we've got from the community, there's a very high level of congratulations on the way she works with people and tries to get them to the point where they can actually present some. While we have definitely reviewed some of our processes, we have to acknowledge that some of them are outstanding. So well done. Thank you.
Interesting to note also that the membership of the committee with external people gives them an opportunity to see how our processes work as well. Rangi.
Thanks, Chair. Look, regardless of whether Wellbeings are out or in or whatever, the Local Government Act clearly gives in Section 10 councils the ability through promoting social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being of communities. It's written in stone. So regardless of what other fancy words are used, that's what we have to do.
And it was interesting at LGNZ last week when there was mention of the well-beings going, that of course suddenly the government didn't see that swimming pools and libraries and places like that can contribute to well-being. No, that is actually part of our core business. They did accept that. It's part of the moving feast of their interpretations. Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Jed. Yeah, just want to follow on from Trish's comment and acknowledge Gemma and the hard work that you do, and also the committee. Trish, it is a really important piece of our community, I think. Just question I have on page 44 of Board Books, or 2 of the report, with the vision and priority around city centre. Is that, because a lot of events are held or proposed outside of the city centre, from my knowledge of the committee when I've been sitting in on it. So is that going to disadvantage, say, stadium events or South City events, or how will that play out if that's a priority for city centre? Keep focused on that.
The city centre focus has been there since the establishment of the fund, and all of the scoring is simply provided to the committee to give them overview. How does it align with the priorities set by council? So obviously the committee includes community representatives, but it is providing funding against council's priorities. There are lots of events that don't take place in the city centre but maybe score well, as Gemma has said, against social wellbeing or cultural wellbeing, and the committee is definitely funding those types of events.
There's also the opportunity, Grant, through people's submissions to, let's say, we'll use Stadium Southland as an example. If there's an event being hosted at Stadium Southland that they don't take part of that event and have a showcase or a parade or some activity on in town to attract people's attention to the fact that it's going to be on that weekend. So sometimes an event organiser can tailor their application to reflect how their event will also impact the city centre, but it doesn't exclusively mean it's just where our focus is, and that focus is now 5.5 years old.
Well, and that's probably my point, where the city centre's got its own sort of vibrancy, I would suggest now, and people know the value of having an event in there. If you look at how we've closed, do we need it to remain a priority, or could we, it's just probably trying to question that. Really.
Great question beyond this, and I think it's up to the next council to set a vision.
Yeah, right, okay.
Because that one's 6 years old, like I say.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. No, fair enough, thank you.
Good question, though. Evelyn.
Look, praise of Gemma is, from me, it usually that goes with another committee, so she knows I think she's the bee's knees, but I really was looking at the fund and thinking about going forward and looking at the applications that you had to cut back on. Funding is very tight now, and getting increasingly tighter. Do you see that there's some things that we have thought of as staples of the Invercargill city vibe or the Invercargill city experience may be at risk going forward, that we're not going to be able to fund? Because I'm looking at some of the multi-year funds, or as I've heard some of them called, the repeat offenders. The people who, to a degree, depend on what they get from one of these 2 or 3 funds for being able to actually do what they do. Where are we sitting with that, do you think?
So through you, Chair Ludlow, if I may direct my question, I absolutely recognise that funding is strained in the city, but to Councillor Boyle as the Chair, and we've just had a workshop, so she's probably best placed to answer that.
Thank you very much. We certainly are very aware that there are people who depend on that. and we are constantly reviewing who we can cut back and who we can't. And Gemma's work is crucial in that she does has a lot of these conversations before they come to our table. And it does depend at any one stage how many applications we get for a round. We don't have a set amount of money to give to a round for that reason. So, for example, this week on Thursday, we've got 7 applications. That doesn't mean we use the same money that we used before, so there is flexibility. Believe me, at heart, we are always looking at those ones where that is not so much as a want, but as a need. We try. Would you like to comment on that? Is that how it sort of...
Ria?
We have a wee go, Trish. So I guess your question saying with the hard times out there in our community, that some applications coming through might be at risk and they're the well-known ones, the high profile, of not receiving the funding. And what Trish says is absolutely right. When you go through the application process with all the people that we know run pretty well leaned, oiled events, like the Southern Multicultural Food, for instance, you're always looking at how they're improving on their business case, how they're coming and how many people that they're actually attracting to that event, and what that gives back to our city in terms of tourism coming in and out. And it's a fairly significant event as opposed to the little other wee group that will collect beads and make certain amount of jewellery pieces for women or young children that are very vulnerable in our society, to another group that wanted to run podcasting for mental health. So there's a very huge vast of applicants, isn't there, Trish? So you're very aware that because this is ratepayer money, if we have applicants that sit there and want to have Australia operational costs and pay for all their staff, well, the likelihood they're going to get that will be not quite like that. So each one of us are very responsible with making sure that we're working really well within our criteria.
Yeah, I think the number of applications will continue to increase, and the pool we know we've reduced, but it's a case of interrogating those applications and also measuring off their expectations when they come to present. It's nice to be on those committees and to be Santa Claus and hand out money, but there's got to be a degree of Grinch in there as well that says no sometimes or not that much. And that's the work that the committee has to do and does so on our behalf. So we thank them for that, and also for this review. There are 4 recommendations that have come with the report. We received the update, notes that subject to delegations processed during the election, the committee will continue to run 5 funding rounds for the next year, adopts the amended Community Wellbeing Fund framework, and notes the recruitment will take place for 2 new community reps following the commencement of the new council term.
Move that way.
Trish and Leslie, any questions, comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for that. Jonathan.
So through you, Chair, I'll take the report as read. This is essentially confirmation of my preliminary findings. 2 points to note, which are on page 59 of board books, is in regards to the injunction, noting that ICC were not a party to the injunction, no findings were made against council. And also in regard to the matter of Mr. Hewittson's interactions with ICC's planning team. I consider that correspondence and notes and record keeping could have been better, and I have acknowledged that previously to Mr. Hewitson. So happy to take any questions.
Councillor Pottinger.
Thanks, Chair. Look, 4 questions. I think. Look, the RMA designates City Council as the consenting authority. Now, who is responsible in the whole application process to identify affected parties? Is it the consenting authority or the applicant? That's my first question.
So at the preliminary stage of the application, the applicant identifies the affected parties.
Okay, so in November last year, Mr. Hewitson came to council and said his poultry stock was suffering adverse effects from the compacting that was going on. Now, he then immediately, as been identified by MPI, definitely an affected party. So what did council do when they first got notified about this? We now have an affected party.
So, in regard to the affected party status, whilst I agree that Mr. Hewitson has been affected, for the purposes of the consent, Mr. Hewitson is not identified as an affected party. I believe that fact stands. At the point in time that Mr. Hewitson engaged with ICC's planning team, from what I understand, they considered the matter. They did what they considered was the best that they were able to help Mr. Hewitson at that point in time. But again, it has to be noted that the district plan does not have anything in it in regard to the issues that Mr. Hewitson was dealing with. And again, in reference to the injunction, the conditions that were imposed through that are far more onerous than are in the district plan.
Okay, look, Section 17 of the RMA states there's a general duty to avoid or mitigate these effects. Now, who is responsible under Section 17 to avoid or mitigate those effects?
So my understanding is that both the applicant and also the authority.
Right,
However,
so
it is important to note that the effects identified in regard to what had been applied for in terms of the resource consent were considered to be less than minor.
I mean, the photos in MPI were quite of the mutilated stock, and it was horrific. MPI came in, and it was obviously apparent right from one, and even key witnesses stated that poultry are incredibly susceptible to vibrations, and in the RMA, vibrations are identified under Section 326 as a noise that is deemed can be adverse. So, so we actually did nothing to help Mr. Hewitson or try and stop what was causing the extreme damage to his livelihood.
So I think it would be fairer to say that we were unable to help Mr. Hewitson.
Okay, so going back to the application then, would it, and I'm just chucking it out there, was the application misleading? Should they have identified this particular user of the nearby land and then went, okay, poultry stock, and you can Google it, straight away it comes up, susceptible to frequencies less than 20 hertz, way below what humans can hear. And when a hen stands, its bones actually touch the ground. It doesn't have the insulation that we do.
Councillor, there are differences between what are prescribed in the district plan and what is cared for under the Act by MPI.
Oh, I'm talking about the RMA. I'm just saying that the RMA, I'm just trying to work out, and then the High Court, the judge deemed that, whoa, you need to do something about it.
That there was mitigation put in place.
Yeah, so we couldn't do anything. We had to Mr. Hewitson's only option was to go to the High Court.
That is correct.
Okay. I just want to, since we've already, earlier we talked about land use capability land, I'm just checking on the map, it shows that particular land is LUC3. Did we consider that? Because I know of another case that Kennington that got declined to build because they're on LUC3 land. Was that? I don't see it in the application or our consent.
So my understanding is that the zoning predates the highly productive land.
The application, the date for September 22 was when this land was designated highly productive land, and the application was in December 23.
So my understanding is that the application was made on the basis that they had the right to develop the land. The 3 separate applications for resource consent dealt with minor matters in regard to breach of density, I believe also a recession plain. I can't remember the third one at this stage.
Now, just looking through the consent, it doesn't mention at all that LUC 3 was considered.
No, so again, to my earlier answer, my understanding is that the HPL status was not required to be considered as part of the application. The development could proceed as of right.
Okay, but as I mentioned, there's one in Kennington at the same time. I'll have to bring that up as a separate issue, but it was declined. Now, the matter of the...
There's no evidence of the reasons for why it was declined that are in front of us at the moment, so we won't refer to Kennington again.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm sorry to bring that up. The other question is, when was this brought to you in your position as chief of this department, this particular issue and the High Court involvement? When did you find out about it?
So the simple answer is not soon enough. I found out about the injunction after it was issued.
Right. So do you believe that we did everything possible? Do we just stick to the letter of the law and tell Mr. Hewitson, sorry, we've given consent, it's too late, we can't go back, we can't do anything? Is that basically the stand we took?
Yes, and I believe that was the correct stand.
Okay, even when you want to read section 17 again, is the general duty to avoid or mitigate effects.
Avoid or mitigate, again, you're quoting the Act out of context.
No, section...
You're just selecting it. Mitigate is the thing that was in there.
No, sorry.
Next question.
This is on advice from an RMA barrister that I'm reading from, and he says section 17 totally applies to this case.
Have you got that written advice?
Look.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. The line of questioning from the councillor at this stage is out of order against our standing orders. The consent was issued correctly, as we have had emphasised, in December 2023. The particular matter was not raised to the attention of council until almost a year later in 2024, at which case we have been advised by our senior staff member that there were no actions in mitigation or otherwise that council was able to take.
Sorry, can you please quote the point of order?
And that we had the legal status.
Thank you, I'm the chair.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm raising the point of order for a relevant matter.
Thank you.
Sorry, you need to. I've been told several times to quote the point of order. Can I please have the point of order from
Thank
council?
you, I'm chairing. I haven't asked for it.
Oh, so there's different rules. Okay, no, that's fine.
Pretty sure when you were chair that you understood that the chair's ruling stood.
Oh, no, that's good.
Because I heard it from you several times.
It's good to understand what
Great.
playing
Next question.
the field is. So, what is Mr. Hewitson's? What is the outcome now? Where does he go from here, and the effect of the construction?
So, to the best of my knowledge, the injunction still stands with the mitigation required, and that will need to be taken into account by anyone undertaking work there.
And who enforces that? Is it council or is it another agency?
So my understanding is this is a civil matter, and it is actually for Mr. Hewitson to undertake. We have no ability under the district plan to enforce the injunction. We are not a party to it.
Okay, so the judge said you've got to stop causing these effects.
No, the judge said mitigate.
Yeah, or mitigate. Yeah. So who So how does the judge know that it's being complied with?
So again, my understanding is that the injunction requires the developer to monitor for sound and vibration and provide that information to Mr. Hewitson.
Okay. And council is completely out of it now?
Yes.
It's a civil matter.
Right. Thank you, Chair,
Please,
for your patience.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I was just going to make the point the High Court issued an injunction to which we were not a party. We were not referred in the High Court injunction in any way that gave us the ability to enforce or otherwise act on the High Court's injunction. The matter's a civil matter that would need to go back to a High Court application if there is some reason for the applicant to do that. But there is no requirement in that High Court injunction, which we have all had a copy of in our minutes and have read, that council be involved in that injunction or the enforcement of it in any way.
Thank you. Barry.
As far as the stormwater drainage issue goes, has Mr. Hewitson come back to you with?
Yes, so I've visited site a number of times recently, I believe. If not last week, it would have been the end of the week before. Mr. Hewitson has concerns which are well understood, and we are monitoring that. Currently, the stormwater design that was part of the application has been approved, it has been constructed. We will undertake ongoing monitoring to ensure that its efficacy. If there are any issues, we will take action.
Councillor Pottinger.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I did forget. Thank you, Barry, for reminding me about the stormwater. I have a photo from Mr. Hewitson showing ponding after a 5 mil rain event. This ponding never occurred before the development happened. So obviously it's he said, she said, but the ponding is obvious, and considering that the land has been raised where the development is, what that is, have you seen this photo from Mr. Hewitson?
So yes, I believe I have.
Yep, so what's council going to do about that? Do we sit and wait and monitor, or is that evidence that the water is not going where it used to go?
So at this stage, there's further monitoring to be undertaken. If this turns out to be a consistent issue or pattern, then we will approach the developer to resolve the matter. But at this stage, I haven't seen any further evidence.
What level of event would it be? Did you talk about 5-year events, and are we talking some serious flooding we need to look out for, or what would trigger it? I mean, I'm just looking at the time period and how much water would that take, just to give Mr. Hewitson some sort of comfort that he doesn't have to sort of persevere for a year of a soggy bog before something happens.
So, no, I'm happy to provide that assurance. Should evidence come to light that the drainage system isn't working as it was designed to do, then we will take action and work with the developer to resolve it.
So this one comes under council monitoring?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Priya.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jonathan, this problem came to us through the public forum with Mr. Hewitson telling us what his situation was and what he was going through, and that he had to report himself or dob himself into the MPI to get some sort of action. And I think from that, the question line that a few of the councillors put to you was, could we have done anything better for Mr. Hewitson to have access to open, transparent communication at our front door? So I see in the report that you've kind of alluded to a few things that say that. So have we put in a foolproof process now to make sure that we're not looking through our back door constantly when some things go wrong like this?
So from my experience, a few things are rarely foolproof, but yes, we have made some changes that give me a much higher level of confidence in regard to how we will interact with people, be they customers or otherwise.
Great. That's good. Thank you.
Further questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any way we can help Mr. Ewitson?
Peter, there's an item coming up later.
So,
PX, if you look at your agenda. Any other issues or questions or comments? If not, the recommendation is to receive that report. Leslie, Barry? I'll put that all in favour.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks, Jonathan. Percy. So, Newfield Park revocation of reserve status. This follows a presentation that Council received at its last full meeting about Te Kāwai. We have your paper. Is there anything you'd like to highlight?
Just to take the report as read, but a few key points was, as you mentioned before, Chair, the proposal for the Papakainga housing development was presented to Council on the 24th of June. This paper merely outlines the steps in the process required should Council make the decision to begin with the revocation of reserve status, and based on that information, the options presented today are to proceed or to not proceed with that revocation. Happy to take any questions.
Duration of the process, roughly?
It depends when it starts, but it's a month for consultation, and then you've got the time around that for listening to objections and things, so that could be about 6 to 12 months.
Thank you. Mayor Clark.
Given this is one of a parcel of land that we're sort of changing the status of and potentially disposing of, do you have any certainty about what happens to the sale funds?
So the land status report that we've got in the report is that it's Crown-derived land, which means upon the completion of the revocation process that Council undertakes, it would then be handed over to Department of Conservation and Land Information New Zealand, and they would go through the disposal process. However, there is the opportunity for Council to apply for funding through the Reserves Act from that basis as well.
Evelyn.
I'm going to preface what I'm about to say with the fact that I wasn't here when this presentation referred to was made, but I understand that there was an implication that we were an investor in this project. I made no commission. No, they've gone public somewhere and said that. I thought it was at Council. No. Okay, so just in case anybody thinks that I'm talking because we've got a stake in this, we don't. In terms of this pocket of land, it's, to most people, it's almost invisible in a way because of how it's tucked away. And I can see the attraction because of the size of it. But I think it's going to be, I think the Koromatua referred to it, where if we revoke it, it doesn't necessarily benefit the ratepayers of the city in any respect, unlike some of the other parcels that we've talked about selling or revoking the status of. So,
except that it becomes rateable property.
Except that it becomes a rateable property. Well, and then if it's a papakaika, there's another question, which Patricia would have to get her teeth into. I can see the attraction. I'm not sure where it leaves us at the table in terms of why we would be revoking its status for this particular purpose, because it's not going to be necessarily an income generating return to us.
I think the point that came up during discussion at the meeting was it's land we're getting nothing from, and we can at least get rates from it and see it being constructively used. Ring.
Thanks, Chair. Look, this was, finding out where this was quite interesting, and it's an interesting piece of land because it has it's a entranceway off Centre Street nicely, and developing this land would fit in with the intensification purposes, because if you look further south, only a fraction further south, you have Elizabeth Park, which is a great green area, and further down to the bottom right is the Te Puawai. So I believe, and I don't jump into revoking reserve status lightly. So I see this fits the area and the school nearby, everything. This is an area that needs promoting and intensifying.
Leslie?
So, yeah.
Oh, sorry, were you...
No, I'm in support of
Thank
revocation.
You. Leslie?
Thanks, Mr Chair. Look, I'm in support of the revocation of this land. It's been on our list for quite some time. It is a large tract of land which at the moment we have no rates income from, and revocation would be the first step in the process that would make it rateable land, which would be a significant benefit to council considering its size. I just want to emphasise to people that the process we are being asked to vote on today does not in fact guarantee the final outcome being the Te Kawai proposal. The process is starting the process of revocation. As staff have made it quite clear, because of the status of that land now confirmed, that there is a process to go through that includes the Department of Conservation, that includes a process that makes it quite clear what we are deciding today is starting a revocation process. It is not a decision that the Te Kawai proposal, good as the Te Kawai proposal was and impressive as many of us around this table said when we heard of it, it is not any sort of guarantee or decision that from today the Te Kawai proposal is approved. It is the start of a process. It's a significant parcel of land. It's a significant parcel of land that we have had on our disposals list for a considerable number of years. It seems sensible at this stage to move forward on it, and I do just want to emphasise to Reverend Cook that the proposal we heard when she was unfortunately absent in no way implied that the local Runanga or Ngāi Tahu were an investor in the proposal. It was a proposal for a use of that piece of land, but it was not telling us that there were any guaranteed funders at that stage.
Thank you. I've got Grant, Barry and Tom. So Grant.
Just on the back of Leslie's point, just what's your knowledge around, I'll use the word, it's not probably the correct word, or to make Department of Conservation aware of the presentation we've had and, you know, our willingness to support that application while they can give consideration to revocation of the land. Do you know if we've got any, do we get their submit to the process or anything like that?
We can have that conversation with the Department of Conservation as part of the revocation process.
So they're clear that the intent of council is that we support that revocation. Revocation, thank you, Chair. Say it 3 times. That, you know, so that's the purpose of why we're asking for it, because of the proposal we've had and the intent to support that application.
There is also a rights of first refusal. So if the Department of Conservation don't want it, then
so
there's
can capture it that way.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I move on, acknowledging on Teams chat Pānia's support for the proposal. Barry?
Definitely back relocating the site for the ratepayers as well, because we'll get revenue off. But we're not getting anything and no one's using it.
It's a very small play parcel on there, but yeah.
Locals and no one uses it.
Tom?
I was probably going to say pretty much what Grant did, that I don't like the idea of starting on a journey where we don't know what the end point's going to be. I mean, if we could get some indication from DOC that they were sympathetic to that idea, then I think that'd be very helpful. I mean, I think we should proceed with the revocation, but I don't think we should just go through that process and then wonder what the Crown's going to do with it. I think we should try to be having a conversation with them, you know, pretty early. I mean, personally, I was enthusiastic about the project that we heard about last month.
Process is what it is, and it's a little frustrating. It's worth noting that really what Te Kawai asked for was we had the plot of land on our list but towards the bottom, and they asked for it to be brought forward, and that's essentially the process that's proposed. Look, thank you for the feedback. If I'm reading the room, the recommendations are that we receive the report, confirm that we support the process, and 3A, proceed. Is that correct? Is there a mover? Steve, thank you. And seconded by Barry. I'll put that. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank
you. May I be marked as an abstention, please?
Thank you for that. And my apologies for not checking. On a similar process, Donovan Park revocation of reserve status. Again, just to clarify why this is here, because the whole process, well, the whole discussion started around the master plan and management plan processes that we were looking at for Donovan. Now, they are two entirely separate things, and so I did promise that because this revocation process needed to be done separately at the conclusion of those, that we would bring it forward, and then that's what it is. And essentially it's to start a process and to go around begin a process of consultation on this specifically. Chris and Cassie, am I right?
Yeah, kia ora koutou. Thank you, Chair. Purpose of this paper is just to action the Council decision to run this process of revocation post the Reserve Management Plan approval, and that occurred in April of this year. The purpose for revocation must be formalised within a Council resolution, and while indication to date has been for future residential development, it's never actually been in a resolution to Council, and also included in the public consultation which is scheduled for August. This also wanted to point out that the summary of submissions will be brought back to Council for discussion, and the Council recommendation forwarded to the Commissioner, who is the Department of Conservation, whose role is to provide advice to the Minister of Conservation, who's the decision maker of this process. Happy to take questions.
Rainey.
First question, and there's a reason for this. How much does a consultation cost the Council to go out and do this, to consult publicly?
So specific figures I don't have in front of me, but it's currently within our operational budgets.
Just a ballpark, anyone? No, no one knows. Okay, the reason I'm asking is that we've already been through a bit of an education path on land use capability land. Now, Donovan Park sits on LUC2 land, and as we heard before, LUC2 land is highly productive under the national policy statement. So if it got revoked from being a reserve, it can only be farmed. It cannot be turned into residential under the current national policy statement. So why would we be going out to consult on something that can't happen when you just said that the reason we want to do it is for potential residential land? Now, it's quite clear there is no ifs or buts about LUC 1 or 2. For the Minister to change it, he would have to change the whole national policy statement for us to make it work. So why, my question is, why, and there's no mention of LUC 2 in this report, why are we doing it?
So I'm not sure that's a question for Chris. Rex?
We're following the Reserves Act, and the Reserves Act requires this process for revocation of reserve status. It's not about use of land or what this land is zoned for. That's another process that would be followed, but only can be followed post-revocation. So you actually have to go through this process to work out whether Councillor Pottinger's process would be taken into consideration through that other legislation. The Minister possibly may, Minister of Conservation possibly may consider that, but I certainly wouldn't want to make that judgment on what they would or wouldn't do.
And the Minister of Conservation doesn't decide on land use capability decisions. Yeah, so why, I'm asking again, why would we do this, considering that the outcome would mean that the only possible use for this land is grazing sheep?
I'll come back to Rex.
Because we have a council decision which has requested us to undertake revocation of reserve status.
To your question as to the room.
Okay, so basically, councillors today are deciding if they want to waste some money that's going to take them nowhere, or decline that and actually bury this idea and carry on with some common sense.
There's no answer to that. Tom.
At an earlier stage, we were presented actually with two options as far as area for revocation. One was 37 hectares and the other one I think was 20 hectares. It was the eastern fringe, basically. We never voted on a choice with respect to that. I think it just, the 20 hectare option, to my perspective, seemed to vanish. But in my view, accepting, the issue, the complexity that's being raised by Councillor Pottinger, but in my view, the purpose of that I always saw as being for an elderly retirement village, if we could attract that. And my understanding in the early days was that there were people approaching us to do exactly that. A retirement village would require much less actually than 20 hectares. So that the option for the smaller portion of land in the eastern end would have been more than enough for what I think, council probably imagined the preferred use of that land to be. So my question is, what happened to the 20 hectare option? Because I personally would be supportive of that. I'm much more concerned about the 37 hectare option, which has got get much more impact on, the eventing and so forth and the show that runs in that area.
Rex?
Through you, Chair. Good question, Councillor Campbell. It was actually identified in drafting of the report. It was something I picked up when reviewing it, that it actually did not take into, when it was first mooted, it did not take into consideration the north and south end of that land was actually under current lease agreements, or lease arrangements with two different parties. So in the time frame that was required to bring this report to this committee, that option was taken out because the current leases that are held by those lessors are akin to residential purposes. So what we could do, if it is the wish of this committee today, and that is considered to be a better option or a preferred option, and I'm looking at Chris here as I'm speaking, but is that we could reallocate the area to satisfy what you're talking about, excluding the current leased portions of that original 20 hectare that was proposed. So if that is the wish, then and is more appropriate, then I would certainly be in favour of hearing the view of the committee because we have to designate an area as per your resolution, if that's the part, but we need to be clear that it would not include the area that is currently leased by the north end and the south end of it, and so that is still an option.
So Rex, if I pick up, because this is only a recommendation in the papers at the moment, there's not anything that's been moved, we could change that to 20 hectares instead of 37 with, or whatever the number is, with the exemption of current existing leased areas.
Could I just ask then, through your chair, another question, which is, how large are those leased areas?
I don't have that information on me, sorry. Do you say how large are those?
So one is the old nursery, or the nursery area that Te Tapuatane have leased, and the other is the area of the restaurant.
Yeah, that's correct.
So we're talking about a relatively small part of that 20 hectares, really maybe 3 or 4 hectares or something. And it does seem to me that given the original purpose, certainly what that had in my mind, that retirement village, what would be left, let's say that was 15 hectares, would be more than enough for a retirement village. So, Chair, if you invite me to suggest something, my suggestion would be that we consider changing the 37 to the original 20 that we had. I forget if it was 19 or 20.
I'll come back to
So
that.
through you, Chair, that area I think you're talking about is classified as local purpose for municipal nursery, and so that's approximately 6 hectares, and so that would reduce it down to about 15 or 14 hectares.
Which is plenty.
But we can confirm that as
So 45 acres, I mean, it's plenty. It's 42 acres.
Okay, still going round the table. I've got Mayor Clark, Leslie, Rea and Rangi. Mayor Clark?
Yep, so the issue of 20 versus 37 won't change if we can't change the LUC2 rating. And my understanding and advice I was given, but I will go back and legally check, is that the Minister, like in all legislation, it does have some discretionary powers. And so it'd be interesting to know. Minister for Agriculture can change that portion of land away from LUC2, which is not highly productive land. It's referred to as arable land, which is slightly different to LUC1, of course. So I think that's an important piece because, as Rangi quite rightly says, if we head down the track and we can't change that land status, then we can't do anything with it. So I think it would be wise for us to get a legal opinion on that, or get an opinion from current minister or ministers.
It is possible that if you went through the process of revocation and was successful, that you could sell it as farmland. There's an irony to that, I know. Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there are several ironies here. As a councillor who, with Councillor Pottinger, voted in November of last year against the decision that we are here discussing today of revocation, I've seen nothing in the current report that would change my position on that matter. In fact, as the discussion has continued, I have seen very good reason why the most we should be doing with this report today is laying it on the table for further information to be gathered. It seems to me that it is not a simple matter of changing the 37 to 20 and exempting some bits and pieces. We have the whole issue of whether we are talking about highly productive land, arable land, the potential that if we ever did revoke the status, the only thing we could do is sell it as farmland, which, you know, among the many ironies here, this is one. So my strong suggestion is that this matter, this whole paper, should be laid on the table for further information to be gained, and that considering that it is now a July meeting, that in fact this would need to come back to the new council and not the current council for further decision.
Depends on how
Thank
long
you.
it takes for those items of clarification to come back, I guess.
Well, yes, considering some of the matters for clarification, I suspect that we are not talking about something that could come to our August meeting.
Just noting the comment from Pania regarding Donovan Park. She supports public consultation, however... No, sorry, Pania, we haven't already consulted during the LTP. That was around master planning and management plans. Ria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everything that Councillor Soper has just said, I completely support. I also voted against this in December, and for the reasons being that I didn't want to vote on something that was someone else's campaign strategy to build a museum and pay by selling off the park, and I still find that I'm in that same position today. I would prefer that this does sit on the table and that the new council comes back and has this item in front of them. There are some questions, and Councillor Pottinger has brought it up religiously. I've brought up about the archaeological importance of where the homestead is. That is, could be a very huge problem for anyone that would or could buy the area identified. a lot of the public feedback when you're around there and talking about what their concerns are, and it came through the submission, even though it wasn't meant to, because it was meant to be separate, was the message was clear: keep our hands off their park. The message was clear that they wanted it to be used for recreational, for their dog walking and what have you. One of the interesting things that came out was, through that consultation time, was that we haven't actually done anything big fundamentally with it to have different activities on there for the public. So, you know, they were quite clear about that. So that's my feedback into this.
Yeah, just to be clear, we did receive feedback like that, which was provoked by media comments at the time that confused the processes that we were actually consulting about. But we did say that we would take it out, and that's the space we find ourselves in now. Rangi.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to say 5 terms I've been on council, and I knew Leslie and I would see eye to eye on one thing. And I will toast that tonight.
Many issues.
I think we have. Sorry, I just had to make a point on that. What I wanted to talk about is I have a map in front of me that was supplied, and it's about Invercargill residential vacant and bare land. And it shows, it's an ICC map, and it shows 300 hectares available of residential land available, ready to build on. Now, wouldn't we be a bit smarter in looking at those areas on the map, 300 hectares, rather than greenfield, something that is quite precious to us? So I'm just sort of raising that we should look at what we can do with what we've got.
Grant?
Yeah, I just want to speak to Maria's ill-informed opinion around how the museum's being funded. It's very clear that the museum's being funded.
Point order.
Also want to make the point that when you, if you were successful in changing the status of this land and then selling it, those proceeds have to stay in parks and reserves. Is that clear?
Mr. Chair.
That's correct. So it can't be used directly for another asset in terms of funding it. So just want to make that point.
Relativity, which is why I'm calling the point of order, that's what this table was delivered on many occasions by the Mayor. So it's not my old information, sorry, it's commentary coming from that side of the room.
I'm speaking to how it's been stated.
Thank you. Grant's answer was correct. I take your point of order and understand it, and under relativity, yes, but funds raised from the sale of reserves have to go back into reserves.
Yes, so we knew that, and that's why we pointed it out.
It wasn't what you said. You said it's going to be sold to fund the museum.
Well, it's ironic how this all
So
started was
Thank you
McCain
again.
Ainsley.
Thank you. Grant is right in that the sale of reserves land proceeds have to go back to reserves, but at the same time Rhea is also right in that that was the commentary that was going on at the time. So we'll move on from that. Trish.
The simple fact is that we did, in November, we did approve that this revocation process be undertaken. Whether we voted for it or not, it was a council decision, and so we're stuck with that, regardless of how we voted. I do think, though, that what Leslie said about letting it sit at the moment would be a very practical thing to do. It would be really good to be able to discuss this, knowing that we've had some conversation with what we might be able to use it for, or whether it needs to be arable land, as Rangi said. So for me, I would rather leave this as it is, knowing that we have already decided that the revocation process would take place, but let's do some more investigation as to the final of what it could be, if that's possible.
Evelyn.
Now, Councillor Bohr just said that whether we voted for it or not, we're bound by it. I think that this is coming to us now, wanting us to consult. I think we have insufficient information about some of the logistical things and the practicalities, but I do want to pick up on a point that the Deputy Mayor made, which was about the use of the land or the sale of the land is being advanced for elderly housing or a rest home. That was only part of it. There was a lot of talk about people in coming to Invercargill for working for big organisations who found that they couldn't find the kind of housing that they wanted, which is the high value, all those sorts of things. So let's not introduce red herrings into this conversation. The first thing is the revocation of the land so that it can be sold or otherwise utilised. We have some questions about, do we have the size right? Do we have the process right? What will happen or could happen with the funds? I'm one of those who is not going to be here next term. I don't have skin in the game in this respect. I'm not out campaigning on it. I'd like it to be left so that we go out to the public with all the things, warts and all, whatever all the pros and cons are, whatever the potential is, so that they can tell the incoming council what they think is the best thing. If we're saying that this is driven by the public, we've all heard the conversations about hands off the green space, hands off the places that we like. They need to say it themselves. It appears that we who are opposed to revocation are not sufficient voice. They need to be the voice. And I think that giving them the opportunity, but making it a fully informed voice, will take the time. We shouldn't be under pressure to do it. And next triennium is not going to make any difference in that respect. So I, as with Councillor Soper, would like this matter to lay on the table until additional information, however long that takes. If it's another 2 or 3 months, then so be it.
Anyone who hasn't spoken before I come back to Mayor Clark, because I'll have something to say after that. Steve?
Oh, yeah, I agree with lots of what's been said, but probably led by Councillor Boyle. I think there's so much confusion for me around Donovan Park. I've got my ideas as to how that's been created, but I think we're at a point now where we are just pulling numbers of size and scale out of thin air, and predetermining outcomes, which concerns me hugely. So I just think we need to park it, take a breath on it until we have the right information, and then we really need to go to the community with real clarity and reset a wee bit and make sure that it's their voice that's being heard on the future of Donovan Park.
Yeah. Peter Rilbarry? Thank you. Mayor Clark.
Just to refute some of the stuff that was said by Ria, which I thought was inappropriate. Casting our minds back, this wasn't my list that was put up or any suggestion of that, while I have been a strong advocate for it. The Parks Division put up a list to council some time ago, several years ago actually, maybe 3 years ago, suggesting there were 16 parcels of land which they thought we should dispose of, which basically said they saw no tangible benefit from it, and there was a cost to maintaining those sections. So we've got 16 of them on the list, and we're progressively working our way through. So Donovan was one of the ones suggested by our Parks Management. The other issue to consider is that we've also got millions of dollars of sale revenue in our long-term plan going forward from the potential sale of Donovan. And so if we're not prepared to sell it, or we just decide to change the status and run it as a farm, which will not give us much sort of income, I think we'll have to look fairly seriously at the long-term plan going forward. But I do support what Leslie has promoted. I think we can't make decisions on revocation until we know what the likelihood is of the Minister giving us an exemption away from LUC2. Because without that, as Rangi quite rightly said, we'll just be throwing money away. So it doesn't hurt us to wait. Whether you want to wait till next term's up to councillors around this table, I don't see why it would need to wait that long. I think we could get a decision fairly quickly from the Minister of Agriculture whether he's prepared to use his discretionary powers or whether he actually has any discretionary powers on this issue.
Thank you. My mind has always remained open around the proposal. I wouldn't say comfortable, but I said we would look at the process. There is no doubt that even if we found ourselves in a position today where we were going to proceed, that the start of the process means that the decision, the consultation, everything else moves into the next triennium. That's just a given. And even if by some miracle we were able to get everything done beforehand, the significance before an election issue would raise its ugly head. So it's going to the next council anyway. I think given some of the discussions that we've had earlier, it would be really useful to get clarification around the LUC2 status and whether or not that was able to be revoked for and for what purpose. Otherwise we will find ourselves in the situation of entering into a process that may be an exercise in futility. To come back to a couple of other points that have been made during discussions around the table, yes, the sale of reserves land has to go back into reserves, but that doesn't mean you can't take money that's allocated to reserves budget from rates take and shift that to somewhere else. There's a technicality. So we don't need a motion because the ruling from the chair is that this will sit on the table until we can get confirmation from the Minister of Agriculture around potential use under LUC2. I'm not setting a timetable on that because, again, if it comes back quickly, all you're doing is starting a process. And if I was at the same consultation events where if the overwhelming consultation comes back against it, fine. And that's why I keep saying my mind is open, because we actually need to specifically consult around what's been proposed with the public without any muddying of the waters with other processes that we're trying to do. So that's the status of this this paper at the moment. Thank you very much for the work that you've put into it to bring it forward. It's not your fault that we've found ourselves asking more questions than we're able to answer today. So thank you very much for that. That brings us to the end of the public part of the meeting. We'll be going into public excluded to discuss 3 matters. The reasons are set out on the agenda. Would somebody like to move?
That way.
Leslie and Trish. Put that all in favour.
Aye.
Against? Carried. We'll take a 5-minute adjournment for those who need a comfort stop. And thanks to those who joined us on the live stream.